Rusame reader, Kurosung, and today I will be reading to you from Everlasting War by Cake. But I'll let you know that I cut this short a couple chapters because I'm going to be honest, there is a major character death that I did not know about, so I'm leaving it to where it's up to interpretation whether he gets better or not. So I cut it at chapter 20. But I also have to warn about the fact that I couldn't figure out all the translations or how to pronounce them because I don't have a TTS bot for everything. So in chapters 8, 12, and 15, there's some stuff in English that should not be in English, but I couldn't figure out the language. Sorry, but anyway, now let's get into the story. Chapter 1, Britannia. Father, please, you need to end this war. America, my son. I've tried. Russian Empire won't budge. I've had France talk to Kalmar, and there's no luck there either. Then I'll go to Muscovy, or Hayo, and I'll meet the Crown Prince of Muscovy, the younger man announced. The two were in the throne room of the Anglo Palace. The older man sat on a large throne that was some steps between the two smaller thrones. The throne room was pretty elegant. White marble floors, large windows allowing natural lighting, some large skylights, and a glass dome sat on the ceiling allowing more natural light. Large golden chandeliers sat upon the ceiling, candlesticks residing in them. They weren't used unless it was dark and light was needed, but the throne room wasn't used during the night hours anyway. Jewels did dangle off the chandeliers, however, creating rainbow spectacles all over the walls and floor. The older man who sat on the throne was King of Britannia, or United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland, and he looked as any old English king would in 1895 would, even though it was not 1895. Just slightly more handsome and a head full of hair. A large black cape, a red sash and ribbon, and just the usual. Just the man also wore a crown. The crown had red fabric in the middle, and it went well with his outfit. And flag. His face was a flag, and his skin tone matched that. The flag was referred to as the Union Jack, crosses of white and red residing on a blue background. Nothing too special. Maybe it was complicated compared to other leaders, but it didn't matter. He was recognizable. The younger man was Crown Prince of Britannia, America, or United States of America. Being Britain's eldest son, he had a lot of responsibility. He was hidden from the outside world, just as all other crown princes, or princesses. Hell, Hayo doesn't know what 3 people competing for that title even looked like. Everyone has seen America's siblings, just not him. He wore a flag with 13 stripes, alternating in red and white, a blue coton, and 50 white stars on that coton. He wore a red uniform with gold embroidery on the mandarin collar and sleeves. A blue silk sash and white and red belt hugged his waist. A elegant gold cord dipped from his epaulette and medal hung in between his collar. He had 5 medals lined up on the other side of his sash and 2 pins, or breast stars, under the medals. He wore a black hat, gold olive leaves embroidered on the top of the visor, and gold band wrapped around the cap. A royal emblem sat in the middle. His outfit was pulled off by a saber, the scabbard of the saber having a gold color, and the saber's handle resembling that of a rapier's. "It's too dangerous, America. I cannot lose you." "Father, I can bring us peace. I just need a message to be sent to their kingdom, and request that their crown prince meet me in the Empirete of Hael," the younger pleaded. "I've told you, it's too dangerous. You're the crown prince. What will happen to the people if you die?" "I don't know, but they're dying. Their husbands are dying. Their sons are dying. Their fathers, brothers, cousins, uncles. Dad, please." "I'll speak to your mother." Britain sighed, realizing he couldn't win that argument. "Thank you, Father," America replied, relief flooding his voice. This quickly prompted him to bow, then leave his father be. So he did so, quickly walking out of the throne room and towards his own room. He was tired. He had spent the day going over updates of the war with his siblings. Sadly, he knew his mother wouldn't allow him to leave, so he asked his brothers, Canada and Australia, to speak to her, to try and convince her. He asked them to bring up their sister, India's 2-year-old son, Tuvalu, and their youngest sister, only being 12, to bring up the fact that Queen Kalamar is having another child in just the end of the year. Just anything to make mother agree. Once he got into his room, he quickly stripped out of his uniform. He put on some shorts and a white top before getting into bed, groaning as he did so. It was a large bed, in a large room, but it was so lonely in there. He always told himself that he had everything, and that, because of that, he can't be sad. But he always felt like something was missing. He rolled around for almost an hour before finally getting comfortable and being able to fall asleep. Sleep, however, doesn't treat him well. He never gets enough of it. He always wakes up feeling the same, lonely, desolate. He had hoped it was just the stress of war that caused this, but India told him it was a person he needed. A person. Something he can't have. Nobody has even seen him. He was a crown prince after all, and if he got married, he'd need a royal wedding, but then everyone would have to see him. He has to wait until his own parents die, or he could break the social norm of the entire world. He'd rather not, though. He wanted that person to be there, though. But who were they? These questions, these thoughts. They're all America thinks about when he's sleeping. A continuous cycle of torture. How the hell did his father do this? Who the fuck knows? Chapter 2, Muscovy. Papa. A man was checking almost every room, everyone, everything, just trying to find his father. He asked every guard he saw if they knew where he was. He checked in his study, the library, his chambers, with his mother, the throne room, but nothing. Отец? The tall male asked loudly again, becoming more desperate. He wanted to make sure his dad was still there, as he hadn't seen him in a few days, hinting at the fact that he's still left for battle.
Отец, я пока не могу быть царем. Где ты?
That roughly translates to, Father, I can't be Tsar yet. Where are you? The man was panicking. He knew he wasn't ready. If a country lost their leader during a war and left the responsibility to his 20-year-old son or his pregnant wife, that would make the kingdom look vulnerable.
Отец, мне скоро пора уезжать в Хай.
That roughly translates to, Father, I have to leave for Hael soon. The man was not wanting to give up yet. He burst into the nursery, which housed his two youngest siblings, and soon, the newest member once they were born. There, he found his mother reading her daughters a book. He quickly looked around, saying,
Мать, ты где-нибудь видела отца?
That roughly translates to, Mother, have you seen Father anywhere? His voice didn't hide the panic under his accent anymore. Once she shook her head, he left. He was out of options. He couldn't leave to check the village. He had to remain hidden. The man stood in the middle of the corridor, defeated. He wore a blue uniform with matching slacks. A thin bronze gold cord draped from his shoulder and into his coat, the tassels of the shoulder boards hiding its origin. He wore 5 medals across his chest and a medal on his neck. A belt hugged his waist, and a fur hat sat on his head, folded up so he wouldn't get too hot. At the time, though, it looked messy. His hair was messy and frizzy. His saber was missing, and the ties to his shoes were untucked. His fur hat was facing off to the left slightly. One medal was angled downwards, and another wasn't touching the other ones. A pitiful look for a crown prince. His flag contained 3 bars, a white bar on top, a blue bar in the middle, and a red bar on the bottom. Sir. The distressed male turned to face a guard, his uniform looking much better than his. The guard stood in front of him, waiting for a response from the crown prince.
Sifi, u was jest nowość dla mnie? The prince asked, trying his best to sound professional, again failing.
The Russian roughly translates to, Serbia, do you have news for me?
Его королевское высочество попросил меня отвезти вас в деревню. Он просил тебя одеться охранником.
That roughly translates to, His Royal Highness requested I bring you to the village. He requested you be dressed as a guard.
Я вижу, я поменяю пальто, а потом мы уйдем.
The prince responded, a wave of relief flooding him. His father was just in the village. The Russian roughly translates to, I see. Well, I'll change my coat, then we'll leave. The guard nodded and turned away, and Russia left to his room. He quickly fixed his hair, changed his coat into a guard coat, and grabbed his saber. He had this outfit in case guests came, as he wasn't even allowed to be seen by other royals, only guards in the castle. No heir was different. The same rules applied to them. All the people knew was vague descriptions his family gave them. Once he was ready, he fixed his fur hat and left to meet back up with the guard. Horosha, Slavir. Мы можем твой сейчас. Видите собой. The prince, thankfully, had a much better time containing his excitement. He had never left the castle grounds. He was born just after his eldest brother said that he wouldn't be crown prince, giving it up to the next brother to be born, which just so happened to be him. The Russian roughly translates to,
All right, Serbia, we can leave now. Lead the way.
The village which surrounded the castle was bustling with people, but the prince noted that it was mainly women and children. Very few men lingered around. He came to the conclusion that other villages in the kingdom were struggling the same. He tried not to look at it like it was his first time, keeping his head straight ahead, but his eyes wandered freely.
Ваше Величество, он в этом здании. Позже он встречается с королем Британии, поэтому он хотел не допускать его в замок.
The guard whispered to the prince, leading him into a building. The Russian roughly translates to, Your Majesty, he's meeting in this building. He's meeting with the King of Britannia later, so he wanted to keep him out of the castle. He took him up some stairs and into a room, where he was there, the king, in all his glory. Russia felt relieved that he wasn't tricked, that his father was still there and well. Russia, syn mój, przyjdź sюда, nam надо поговорить. The Russian roughly translates to, Russia, my son, come here, we need to talk. Russia walked over to his father and sat in the chair next to him. In English, we don't need the guards outside the hearing. His father spoke after a minute, his accent still heavy. What did you need, father? So, you know you're going to Hael, but you don't know why. Well, in case Britain and I's negotiations don't end well, you'll meet his son and discuss terms. Father, I believe I'm supposed to not be seen. Am I supposed to wear, like, a veil during those negotiations? Russia asked, tensing up. I know, it's technically not allowed, but you will be in Hael for 2 months for those negotiations. Both of you will show yourselves to each other, and you'll find a way to get me that damn land. As the Sultan of Hael agreed. We wouldn't send you there if he didn't, Russia. His father said harshly. Use your brain, tupitsa. That little bit of Russian roughly translates to dumbass. Russia nodded, allowing his head to hang a bit. He felt a bit dumb after asking that question, but he just wanted to make sure. 2 months was a lot, and that means he'd be way away from his family for a while. Their son is said to be extremely intelligent. You need to be careful. Hell, if you need to, try and charm him, but no agreeing to marry anyone in his family, even him. Papa, why would I do that? That'd end in 2 kingdoms with no direct heirs. Exactly my point, he responded. Go back to the castle. Serbia will take you to Hael tonight. Da, otec. The Russian roughly translates to, yes, father. Chapter 3, Outside. America stood in front of his parents, shocked by the news. His mother agreed to let him go to Hael. He would meet the Crown Prince of Muscovy. Thank you, but before I leave, should I bring some sort of veil to hide myself? Yes and no. You'll wear a veil while on the horse, but you will be face to face with him. Anyways, I must be going. America, pack your stuff. Take Canada with you as your guard. I'm heading to Muscovy now. Britain stood up and grabbed his crown from the arm of the throne, kissing his wife on the cheek as he did so. He stepped down the steps, carrying his crown in hand, and then walked up to his son, embracing him in a hug. Stay safe, Aimee. I'm putting my trust in you that you'll stop this war. America nodded in response, hugging his father back. Once they parted, Britain walked out of the room, his cape gliding while he walked away. America turned to his mother, who had walked down the steps and was a few steps from him. She got closer and grabbed his hands, holding them firmly. Fiji and Tuvalu cannot continue living in a war. Poor Myanmar is so young, he shouldn't remember it if you end it. If your father fails, and it isn't your father's fault, you need to get under the Muscovite's skin. We're all counting on you. Take Malaysia. She's smart, and she can help you create a compromise. And ask India for a veil. She can lend you one that you can see through. Thank you, Mother. I'll do my best. I'll let Nada and Melee know. I love you. France pulled him into a hug, resting her chin on his head. I love you too, dear. Now, hurry along. America pulled out of the hug and smiled, quickly turning around to run and get his brother and sister. First, he'd get his sister Malaysia. Her room was the closest. He ran up a flight of stairs, occasionally getting his aigulette's point hitting his face. Once he got to her room, he took a breath and knocked. No, I'm not hungry, Nigeria. Oh, America, Malaysia said while opening the door. That was a concerning sentence, but Mother said you have to come with me. I'm leaving the kingdom, he proudly said, sticking his chest out. But, all right, I'll get ready. I'm assuming we're taking horses? Yep, me, you, and Nada. All right, well, go tell him. I'll meet you at the stables. And get a veil from India, she said, closing her door. Mother already said that, but thanks. We'll be gone for 2 months, according to Dad. America then began a slight jog to Canada's room. It was just down the hall, and India's was right next to it, so he decided to yell. Canada! India! I need you! Canada was the first to open his door. He looked tired, but America understood why. The sun had only risen enough to see about half an hour before. India was the next to open her door. Her long hair was a mess. A little boy peeked out from behind her legs. All right, Nada. We're going to Hael for 2 months. You, Melee, and I. We'll be, or I'll be, rather, meeting with the Crown Prince of Muscovy. You're just a guard for this mission. I think Melee is more like an advisor. India, I need a veil to wear from you. We 3 will be riding horses there, so I need something to shield me as we go through town. And hi, Leon. You should go get more sleep. Yeah, I'm gonna go get ready. I'll meet you at the stables. Canada yawned, shutting his door. Come in, Dumpa won't mind. I'll get you ready, India said, opening the door so America could step in. A lamp was lit just by the bedside table. By a man, he carried it to India, handing it to her. He picked up Myanmar and carried him back to bed, laying him down. India took America's hand and sat him on a stool before fishing in her wardrobe for a veil. Here, we'll use this one. It's hard to see through from the outside, but easy from the inside to see through. And it's black, so it will match. She quickly turned the fabric around multiple times to figure out the right sides, then stepped up to America, using pins and jewels of hers to stick it to his hat. She allowed it to fully wrap around his head and stay on the hat, if he took it off. Once she was confident, she hugged America. Stay safe, please, and don't let us down. We all depend on you. Our population will start declining if this war continues for another year. Don't worry, I'll do what I can. Plus, I'll have Malaysia with me. After a quick conversation, America left India's room and walked to his, grabbing the luggage he already fixed. He quickly left and walked down a different set of stairs and began to walk to the stables. He noticed Malaysia and Canada already there. Canada wore a red tunic with a black belt hugging his waist. His collar completely wrapped his neck, and a satchel sat on his side. He wore breeches with a yellow stripe on the side and large brown boots with spurs on the back. Black gloves sat on his hands, and a tan felt hat with a brown band rested on his head. Malaysia wore a light blue dress which completely covered her body, jewels glittering her dress. She wore her hair up in a bun and had earrings and a necklace that matched her outfit. She wore white flat shoes underneath as well as white leggings. To top it off, she wore her tiara as well, the gems shining in the sunlight. Like her brothers, she too carried a saber, and it hung off a belt tied tightly to her hips. "Ah, well, India worked magic. Can't see you," Canada exclaimed, as America got closer. "We'll put the luggage on my horse, and I'll ride in the back. Malaysia has a map, so when we leave town, she'll let us know which way to go." America nodded, setting his luggage down next to Canada. He grabbed his horse and saddled it, then leading it out of the stable with the other two steeds. Once they were all ready, they hopped on their horses and America led the way out of the castle. It was now nearing noon, so the streets were busy, but in order to leave, they would have to use the main streets. So America led his horse down the path from the palace and into the village. People immediately took notice of him. A veiled man riding a horse slowly through the village, followed by a princess and a prince. It seemed pretty obvious that would be him. Crowds began forming around him, forcing him to stop his horse as to not trample them. "This is official royal business. Back away from the crown prince," Malaysia yelled. Despite her young age, she was extremely mature and knew how to control her voice well, something she got from their mother, just like himself. Sadly, being crown prince and all, the entire village seemed to know that he was out of the palace. America realized the only way he'd get them to move was possibly to threaten them, so he placed his hand on his saber. He turned to Canada and Malaysia behind him. They did the same, but they drew theirs, using them to shoo the crowd, which in return allowed America to drop his hand. With this, they were able to escort America through the crowd and keep people from trying to grab his veil. Once they left the village, America had a sigh of relief. He waited a few minutes till he flipped the veil up as they were in the plains. "Thanks, Melee," America chuckled, giving her a soft punch on the shoulder once she got to his side. "Yeah, of course." "And they say royals aren't respectful," Canada scoffed. "You saw how they kept trying to take off America's veil? Now we're gonna get an angry letter from Mother or Father about drawing our sabers." "We had to do what we had to do," Malaysia argued, slumping forward. "It's my fault. I could have at least maybe dressed as a guard and escorted one of you." "Apparently, that's what Muscovy's crown prince does, but they don't know which guard it is," Canada replied. "Prince Taiwan told me, by the way." He quickly added in, "Oh, Malaysia, which way is Hale?" America asked, looking around. "This way," she responded as she took the lead. "We might run into some small villages or hamlets, so we need to all keep an eye out for you, M.A. "Any idea when we'll get there?" Canada questioned, positioning himself on Malaysia's right flank, while America sat on the left flank. "Tonight, just before the sun sets completely. So you should still be able to say a greeting to, whatever his name is." "Crown Prince Russia of Muscovy," Canada replied. "Right, gotta remember that." Bahasa Inggris yang betul mungkin membantu, Malaysia responded, humor lingering in her voice. I believe that is Malay for proper English may help. Apologies for mispronunciations. I couldn't find anything to read that out to me, so I just tried my best and I wung it. Maybe speaking English too, Canada replied. Chapter 4, Arrival.
Russia arrived in Hael around sundown, deciding to make his way to the palace with Serbia. They had taken Estonia with them in order for Russia to blend in more. Once they arrived at the palace, they got themselves situated with the palace guards and maids. Then they made their way inside. There, they were taken to the throne room, where they would meet the Sultan.
Помни, Эстония, скажи, что мы здесь, потому что тебя послали сюда учиться. Он знает настоящую причину, но его охранникам это не нужно. Ведите себя так, будто вы только что приехали учиться.
That roughly translates to, remember, Estonia, say we're here because you've been sent to learn here. He knows the real reasons, but his guard doesn't need to. Act like you just arrived for your learning. Matin, mida matin. Apologies for any horrible mispronunciation there. That roughly translates to, I know what I'm doing. Russia nodded in response as he walked by his sister's side. Serbia was at her other side, as he was actually a guard. Russia forced himself to look professional, keeping his eyes forward and a deadpan face. When they reached the throne room, both Serbia and Russia stayed outside.
اليمن أحدهم هو ولي عهد موسكو. أعلم ذلك، فهو يرتدي دائما زي الحارس عندما يكون هناك جمهور حوله.
One of the two guards said. Russia felt awkward. He couldn't translate it, but he had a feeling they were talking about him, as he heard Muscovite thrown in there. The Arabic roughly translates to, Yemen. One of them is the Muscovite crown prince. I know it. He always dresses as a guard when there's public around.
هل تعتقد أن الأميرة موجودة بالفعل هنا للتعليم؟ يبدو الأمر كما لو أن الأميرة هنا لإلهاء لأنه ستكون هناك مفاوضات هنا.
The guard who replied, too, had a flag. His flag had a red bar on the top, a white bar in the middle, and a black bar at the bottom. The Arabic roughly translates to, do you think the princess is actually here for schooling? It seems more like the princess is here as a distraction because there will be no negotiations here.
أعتقد أن هذا ممكن بالتأكيد. يبدو أن ولي العهد البريطاني قادم إلى هنا. لكنني متأكد من أن سلطان المملكة العربية السعودية سيخبرنا بكل تأكيد.
The guard who spoke bore a flag as well, it looking similar to the other guards. He had the exact same flag, just in the white bar sat 2 green stars. That roughly translates to, I think it's most certainly possible. Apparently, the Britannian crown prince is coming here. But I'm sure the Sultan of Saudi Arabia will most definitely tell us.
لماذا لا تسألينهم يا سوريا؟
That roughly translates to, why don't you ask them, Syria? Russia decided to ignore the guards as they continued their conversation, when something caught his eye. A man in a uniform similar to his royal uniform, except all black with a blue sash draped across his chest. For a second, Russia wondered why all the royals, or some guards, wore a sash. He had quite a few medals and wore a very decorative necklace. His hair was neatly slicked back, a crown resting on top. He wore a cape of silk fabric, but it wasn't silk. It had embroidery of gold leaves and swirls everywhere. His flag, though, was one of the most complicated ones he's seen. Green at the top, white in the middle, and red at the bottom. But a red symbol sat in the middle of the white. At the line where the other two colors met, the white, there was what seemed to be white patterns or writing. And Russia assumed writing. He walked over to where the other guards were and stood in between Russia and Serbia, who stood next to the two Hyalis.
إذا كنت تعتقد أنه يمكنك الإفلات من الحديث فأنت مخطئ. ارجع إلى مشاعات الحراس. هذا أمر.
The two guards bowed and left immediately, leaving Russia to believe they were in trouble for talking. That roughly translates to, if you think you can get away with talking, you're wrong. Go back to the guards' commons. That is an order. Now, I'm not necessarily supposed to do this, but I'm assuming one of you is the Muscovite crown prince, he said, his eyes particularly sitting on Russia. You must be a possible heir here, aren't you? Russia replied, allowing them to know he is by speaking English. Yes, Prince Iran, pleasure to meet you. Pleasure to meet you too. Once your sister returns, some guards will take her and your guard to their rooms, and I'll show you around. That would be lovely, Russia said, dipping his head slightly. Saudi told me the real reason you came. He's told me and Turkey to help you both. He's got an all-red flag with a white crescent and star in the middle. He shouldn't be easy to confuse. The other one, with a flag close to his, is a female servant, Tunisia. And just at that moment, Estonia walked out of the room. A red and slightly laughing man followed behind. Mas sin mida odela, she muttered, putting her head on Russia's arm, probably trying to hide. That roughly translates to, I forgot what to say. Hello, pleasure to meet you. I'm assuming you're Russia. The taller man greeted, a slight laugh sneaking into his greeting. Yes, sir, I am. Wonderful. I'm sure Iran's already introduced himself and whatnot. This guard here, Arbisian, will help your sister and your guard. If you need me, Iran can help you find me. He wanders the palace a lot, Iran added in, explaining his last comment. 1 minute he's in his study, the next he's in the courtyard on the other side of the palace. It's not that bad, the young ruler replied, defending himself. Don't listen to everything he says. He's a friend, so he'll probably lie to you. Bullshit! I mean everything I say. Like how that was bullshit! Iran jokingly yelled. Your Majesty, their rooms are ready, a guard interrupted, probably for the better. Right. I'll take Russia here and show him around, Iran said, turning and walking away. Russia gave a quick bow and pat his sister's head quickly and left to catch up with Iran. I know you were raised in a kingdom where royals are typically more well-behaved than what you just saw, but you're supposed to have fun at times, you know? Russia nodded in response, though he didn't necessarily have fun often. He was dreading the thought of his father passing the crown to him. So, this other crown prince I'm meeting, has he arrived yet? Nope, he should be here after sundown, hopefully. Britannia is further than Muscovy, so he has a longer trip. Plus, the dressing as a guard is really just reserved for Muscovy. Here in Hayel, we blend in. Britannia hides them from anyone but family and staff. Nicaragua and Prussia work in different ways too. And that means he probably attracted a crowd, which delayed him. So you wouldn't attract as much of a crowd. He would. They've never had to do this, so they've probably found some obscure, abstract way to hide him. Like a veil, so they don't see his face. Most likely, yes. Iran, you won't believe it! The two turned to see a man running towards them, almost tripping as he did so. Apologies, I'm just going to read this one in English. I can't figure out what language this is. Some guards stand outside of Saudi's study have said that there's a likely chance you'll be the next heir. He excitedly yelled. You got it, and not that Egypt, bitch. Well, let's not insult him. He commands the military, so we don't need him going after you. Iran quickly said, looking around hurriedly. Who gave you the right to dismiss my guards? A voice questioned from behind. Here. Crown Prince Russia, right? Here, we'll finish your tour. Turkey said anxiously, beckoning for Russia to follow him. You aren't going anywhere, Turkey. The man stood just behind Russia, his eyes filled with rage. His flag was similar to the two guards from earlier, except for, instead of some stars, it was a gold eagle with a crest. He pulled a rapier and held it to Iran's neck. Just because he loves you doesn't mean I can't kill you. Russia didn't know what to do. Does he pull out a saber and defend Iran? Neither Iran nor the other man, who Russia presumed to be Turkey, has any weapon to defend themselves. The damn Sultan didn't either, but Russia had one. Russia glanced up at Iran. Everything about him was showing fear. His face, his body language. You are horrific at greeting people, Russia said, trying to pull the attention off Iran, and it worked. Excuse me? Just because you're from Muscovy doesn't mean anything but the fact that you're a stuck-up brat, he replied. Ataysuka, Russia mumbled, diverting his eyes away from the country. That roughly translates to, and you're a bitch. Excuse me? I am not here to start a war, nor watch a war happen, Russia announced, straightening himself out. I'm here to stop one, so if you want the help, you can walk away. Turkey grabbed Iran and Russia, dragging them both away from the man and shooing them off, allowing Iran and Russia to get far enough away that they could continue their tour. Chapter 5. Meeting. America woke up, dreading the idea of his first meeting today. He never had meetings with anyone other than his family or, occasionally, some guards, so he was afraid he'd mess up. Fuck me, he groaned as he sat up, rubbing his eyes and stretching his arms out after. Might as well get dressed and see if Melee is awake. America diligently got dressed and left the room, immediately greeted by Canada and Malaysia. Oh, hey Rika, Canada greeted. We were just about to see if you were awake. A letter came in from Father, Malaysia explained, handing him the letter. Negotiation failed. It's up to you now. Us. It's up to us. Where's this prince I've got to meet? Your meeting isn't till an hour, Canada objected, grabbing the bottom of his coat. a habit developed to do whenever he was 1. Nervous, or 2. Scared. Doesn't matter. We need to start now at best. Get to know each other and get this damned war over with. South Africa or Hong Kong is going to battle at this point. South's 17. He's not allowed in till he's 18, and Hong Kong is father's advisor, as Nadia's acting as yours, and Kiwi is mother's. Random, but related thoughts. Why are those 2 advisors to our parents? They're smart. I don't know what to tell you. And you're more fit for military, Nada, so don't say anything. Malaysia answered, looking out a window. Here, I found the meeting room. Just follow me. The 3 walked through multiple corridors, America taking the time to memorize every little detail so he could get to and fro from the meeting room to the room he was staying in. America did notice a very scary, in his opinion, man threatening Turkey. He recognized the man as Egypt, the general to the Haile military. Here, only you're allowed in. Nada and I will stand guard till his guard comes. Then his guard will take my spot, and I'll go off with their princess somewhere else. Probably the garden. All right, I'll see you later then, America said, entering the room. Once he shut the door, he looked around the room. A large table sat in the middle, only 2 chairs present. A flag of Muscovy and a flag of Britannia hung on their either side. America walked to the side his flag hung and stood by the chair. Please be here soon, he mumbled. I don't want to stand for too long. After a few minutes, the door opened, and in stepped a man. He wore a nice bluish-green uniform with red and yellow flares, matching pants, and a red sash. Привет. It's a pleasure to meet you. He approached America, who walked to the midway of the table and stuck out his hand. Crown Prince of Russian Federation of Muscovy. Crown Prince, United States of America, of Britannia. He returned, shaking his hand. Let's get started? Da. Once the 2 had sat down, they began negotiations. America had let Russia say what he, or probably his father, wanted. The land we took from you must be transferred to us. He finished. Question. You're the youngest, right? Male. Youngest male. Ah, all right. So, how badly do you want this to end? America asked, wanting to know more about the Muscovites' motives. I don't want any of your land. Otets does. I don't want my siblings living throughout the war. Then there's something we've got in common. America sighed in relief. What if we make this easy? Just sign a treaty and Britannia will give you money. Yet, I am afraid I cannot do that. The 2 bickered back and forth for the remainder of the session, one trying to reason with the other, trying to end the war. The other kept trying to keep his life and title to do exactly as his father would want him to. A few thoughts of possible compromises entered their head, but the other would disagree if it was brought up. America was losing his patience. Russia was losing his temper. But the 2 of themselves forced themselves to be professional to an extent. Bickering wasn't exactly professional, but it was what they were doing. Here, we'll call it a day, talk to advisors or whoever. How's that? Fine, the Muscovite replied, standing up. America stood up as well, and the two bowed to each other before Russia left the room, allowing America to drop and slump into the chair, losing all composure he once had in him. He soon left the room, not saying a thing to Canada, just going where he reminds himself his room was. Canada decided to follow behind rather than next to him and stay quiet, realizing America probably didn't have any luck. And he'd be correct. Nada, just go. I need to be alone. All right, he responded, just stopping his tracks as America carried on. That's when America decided not to go to his room, but search for Saudi Arabia, hoping he might be able to help. He looked in the throne room, asking guards, and nobody seemed to know where the Sultan went, except for one person. Oh, Crown Prince America, are you looking for Saudi? America turned to face Turkey, who approached him, a emotion America couldn't decipher plastered on his face. I am. Do you happen to know where he is? America responded, looking around as he asked. He's busy with Iran right now. He's either telling him how he actually feels about him, plotting a way to get rid of Egypt, or telling him he's crown prince. And personally, I hope it's the second option. What's with Egypt anyway? Is there something bothering him? Tokugawa Shogate is, for some reason, he's been trying to get Saudi to declare war on them since his parents wouldn't agree. It's all just some stupid thing. And he still has that position? We asked Saudi to change it, kick him out, or something, but Saudi likes peace. He can't handle many conflicts or he'll get stressed far too easily. Yes, you might think he's not fit for Sultan, but it has its benefits. He's all about compromises, which is why he allowed King Britain and Tsar Russian to send you both here. Now that I think of it, I wonder why Crown Prince Russia's name is so close to his father's. Yeah. Also, Sultan Saudi Arabia likes Prince Iran? Oh, most definitely. He's had a crush on him since we were teenagers about. And yes, we're not related. Yet we have the title. Nedj and Hejaz were both great rulers and even better parents, and gave us titles so Saudi wouldn't be alone, since they could only have one kid. They sound lovely. They were lovely. Saudi was so devastated when they passed. It took 2 weeks to announce their deaths. They died together? America asked, surprised. Yeah, they were murdered in the garden, hence why Saudi visits there so often. When it's their Remembrance Day, he spends the entire day in the spot they were found, from midnight to midnight. It hurts to see, and Iran has just recently begun staying with him while he's there, bringing him food, water, shade, whatever he needs to keep him healthy and safe. I've been using my own rapier with Morocco and Cyprus to keep guard while he's out there. Who murdered them? Many of the palace guards have claimed it was Egypt. Turkey explained, dropping into a hushed tone. I believe so, too. He wants the Crown Prince title. It would make sense. He wants to control the country and military. He would make Saudi give him the title, then kill him. Why would someone want that? Being a ruler is hard. Harder if you're the heir, too. America asked as they walked down a new hallway. I've got no answer for you there. He's a crazy man, if you ask me. I think it made sense when Prince Soviet announced that he wouldn't crown the Prince of Muscovy, and rather the General of Muscovite military. America nodded in response, taking notice that the larger windows showed the garden. Turkey stopped and faced the windows, so America did the same. Outside, Saudi Arabia was on his knees, head angled towards the ground. Iran was next to him, holding a parasol over his head, protecting the mourning sultan from the sun. Speaking of which, Turkey started with a sigh, I've got to go head out now. You can come with, but Morocco and Cyprus are both out there, and they seem to be looking for me. Turkey turned, and America followed on his heels. They approached a door and exited, finding themselves in the garden. The two had remained quiet when they approached a group. Turkey immediately assuming his position, drawing his rapier and holding it against his shoulder, while a hand was on his side, the other the exact same, pinned to his side. America stood by Iran, looking down to Saudi Arabia. He knew he'd be there for a while, so he figured he'd familiarize himself with his surroundings and focus on the Sultan. Chapter 6. Tensions. Sounds of a child playing filled the room. His mother sitting on a chair, watching the child, her smile as soft as could be. She wore a red and gold short-sleeved top, which just stopped under her chest and hugged her body tight. A matching skirt sitting low on her waist, starting tight on her but flailing out, and a large scarf wrapped around her matching outfit. She had a large gold necklace wrapped around her neck with red jewels covering its surface. Gold bracelets all over her forearms. A single ring sat on her right hand. A jewel hanging on her belly with a band of jewels wrapped around her belly. And her head was littered with jewelry. She had a large hoop nose ring with red and white gems dangling and gold leaves in the corner of the hoop, having a chain covered in white pearls leading to her ears, which had large hoop-type earrings with even more jewels. She had a headpiece that ran from the middle of the top of her head to her forehead with two large rubies, one in the middle of the gold pendant on her head, one hanging off the pendant, and smaller gold and white gems hanging round. She had a red dash in between her eyebrows, which houses a gold jewel in the middle. Smaller red dots sat over her eyebrows. A gold dot sat on the outside of her eye on each side, contrasting to her black shadows around her eyes. She had a flag, one with 3 vertical stripes, but a symbol sat in the middle. A top saffron stripe, a bottom dark lime green stripe, and a white stripe middle, which housed navy blue wheel with rays extending. She had slick, shiny black hair, which sat in a neat bun too, making her look perfect as can be. Her skin was the same green on her flag, and the saffron only appeared on the patterns of flowers, lines, leaves, and various other things on her hands, wrists, and lower forearms. Myanmar, it's lunchtime, the woman said, standing up. Let's go eat some food. I think Grandma made something today. The child got up and ran to her side, grabbing her hand as if to say he was ready to go. Together, they walked out of the room to the dining hall. "Hi, India," a male called out, who was just about to sit down. "Hey, Myanmar, bud. What's up?" "Hi, Hong Kong," she replied. The child only waved, causing Hong Kong to smile in turn. Once they ate, the child, Myanmar, left with one of his uncles, leaving India, Hong Kong, and another male alone. "Oi, Raj, do you know why America went to hell? Wasn't he supposed to stay inside of the palace until he became king?" "Oh," India started, her once soft expression face now becoming full of nervousness. "America, Canada, and Malaysia went to meet with the Muscovite Crown Prince. Malaysia actually sent me a letter saying that a guard named Serbia, who apparently hit it off with Nada, and Princess Estonia are there too." "Nada hit it off with a royal guard from a different kingdom, huh? I swear he's always looking for trouble." Hong Kong joked. "The Bretonians and Muscovites. What a love story." Now that it's just a guard, imagine America meets the Muscovite princess and they fall in love. The unnamed male replied, hitting Hong Kong on the arm. "No, Ozzy, he's going to fall in love with the Crown Prince of Muscovy," India joked, earning laughs from the men. "Or get this, Malaysia falls in love with him." Hong Kong chuckled, leaning back. "Think about it. Australia, India, Malaysia will go head over heels for any guy that shows her a bit of kindness." "Men can't be that much of dicks," Australia said, furrowing his brows. "Are folk people really that rude?" "From my experience, not many like us royals," Hong Kong responded. "They see us as stuck-up snobs, full of ourselves, a bunch of self-centered assholes. But when I met Prince China and Kaiser German Empire, they were far from what folk people think we're like." "Yeah, but if we invite them to enter the palace or something, they'll think we're trying to buy them over," India groaned. "Princess, Indian Raj, it's an emergency." The three turned to see a maid running towards the group, her face red from running, presumably. "What's wrong, Alicia?" "Both Duke Myanmar and Prince Fiji have gone missing. A Muscovite spy was found and a few more left before guards caught them. They took them." "Fuck. India, stay here," Australia said. "Hong Kong, we're going to Muscovy." "Not asking mother or father? They'll get pissed." "We're getting our nephew and little brother back. Plus, we'll be more civil than mother." India watched her two brothers walk out of the dining hall with the maid trailing them, leaving her alone. She was about to break down into tears, but she was managing to hold it in. She stood in that hall for a while, allowing time for Australia and Hong Kong to get ready and quite possibly leave before she ran out. She ran as quickly as she could to the throne room, tears streaming down her face. She burst in and stumbled in, looking up to see her two now worried parents. "Oh, dear, what's wrong? Are you still postpartum? Myanmar is a little over 2 years now." France repeatedly asked, now standing at her daughter's side. Muscovy took them, she screamed. Fiji and Myanmar, they're gone. Oh, dear, they'll be safe. Britain, love. I'm going back to Muscovy, he announced, grabbing his cape. I'm getting my son and grandson back. Ozzy and Hong Kong already left, she was able to say between sobs, holding onto her mother as if her life depended on it. They're going to die. I'm sending a letter to America then. He needs to get them back. If there's no response in 3 days, and Australia and Hong Kong aren't back, or they aren't with Fiji and Myanmar, we're going to Muscovy, France. Britain announced, grabbing India and pulling her into a hug. India let go of her mother and held onto her father, sobbing into his chest. Britain and France were discussing what to do, but India wasn't focusing. She wanted her son back. She wanted her brothers back. Her sister. All of them. She wanted America, Canada, Malaysia, Australia, Hong Kong, Fiji, and Myanmar back. She wanted the war over. She wanted peace. Don't worry, Dia. She heard her mother's voice break through her thoughts. We're going to get them back. Let's get you to bed. You'll need the sleep. Chapter 7. Traitor.
Isa andis käsu Britannia hertsog Myanmari vangistada, kuid nüüd on ta vangistuses nii hertsog Myanmar kui ka prints Fiji.
Estonia explained, twirling her hair with her finger. That first part roughly translates to, Father has ordered the capturing of Britannia's Duke Myanmar, but now he's got both Duke Myanmar and Prince Fiji in captivity.
Kasutage seda oma eeliseks, et isale meeldida. Nad teevad kõik, et oma pere turvaliselt tagasi saada.
And that roughly translates to, use this situation to your advantage to please Father. They'll do anything to get their family back safely.
Представьте, что вас похитили, Эстония. Мораль отца неправильная. Он требует, чтобы вся Британия сожгла Московию дотла.
Russia exclaimed, slamming his hands under the table. That roughly translates to, imagine you were kidnapped, Estonia. Father's morals are all wrong. He's asking for the entirety of Britannia to burn Muscovy to nothing.
Он сумасшедший. Мы все это знаем. Знаешь, я могу положить этому конец, просто будучи царем. Тогда Московия не будет участвовать в глупой войне, устроенной упрямцем.
Russia threw a quill across the room, standing up to pace and rant. The Russian roughly translates to, he's insane, we all know this. I can end it by being Tsar, you know this. Then Muscovy won't be in a stupid war caused by a stubborn man. Venema Kulamind. That roughly translates to, Russia, listen to me.
Нет. Ты такой же сумасшедший, как и он. Надо было привести Украину, Белоруссию или Узбекистан.
That roughly translates to, no, you're as insane as him. I should have brought Ukraine or Belarus or Uzbekistan. Estonia mumbled something under breath, leaning back in the chair she sat in and crossed her arms. Russia glared at her, but continued to pace. Serbia, вы должны се, пожалуйста. He called, stopping in his tracks. That roughly translates to, Serbia, enter please. Да, ваше величество. That roughly translates to, yes, your majesty.
Вернитесь в замок и убейте отца. Это приказ. Передайте любому охраннику мой приказ и скажите им, что у них такой же приказ. Теперь я буду царем, он слишком безумен, чтобы управлять королевством.
That roughly translates to, Go back to the castle immediately and kill father. That is an order. Tell any guard my order and tell them that they have the same order. I'll be Tsar now. He's far too insane to run a kingdom. Serbia just stood there, shock encasing the entirety of his face. For the first time, it looked like he had emotions, something that all the Muscovite royal guards hid extremely well. Kasa oled ohol, omaisa tampin, aga ema? Estonia protested, standing up to face Russia. That roughly translates to, are you insane? Killing your own father? What about mother?
Мать была вынуждена выйти за него замуж. Она бы не стала иметь от этого мужчины столько детей. Женщина даже не должна заботиться о таком количестве детей. Используй свой мозг, Эстония.
He yelled back, throwing his fur hat onto the desk. That roughly translates to, Mother was forced to marry him. She wouldn't have chose this many kids with that man. A woman shouldn't even have to take care of that many kids. Use your own brain, Estonia.
Если бы вас заставили выйти замуж за человека, которого вы не любили из страха, что вашу семью убьют, вы бы вообще легли с ним в одну постель. Заняться с ним сексом. Быть вынужден нести своих детей.
That roughly translates to, if you were forced to marry a man you didn't love and fear your family would be murdered, would you even share the same bed as him? Have sex with him? Be forced to carry his children? Estonia sat back down, staring at the ground with her hands in her lap. Russia just told his younger sister something that only him and his eldest brother knew. Now his guard also knows. He could tell other guards in order to justify his order for the murder of his father. He let his anger get the best of him, and now he's told a massive family secret that nobody was supposed to know.
Я уйду сейчас и буду там до захода солнца. Должен ли я кого-нибудь вернуть или после того, как я выполню свою задачу, объявят, что царь Российская империя мертв?
Serbia announced, finally pulling himself back together. The Russian roughly translates to, I'll leave now. I'll be there before sundown. Should I bring anyone back or have it announced that Tsar Russian Empire is dead once I've completed my task?
Teatage tema surmast, see paneb Venemaa tagasi minema, nii et valmistume pärast tänaseid läbirääkimisi lahkuma. Tee seda, mida õigeks pead, Rus.
Estonia replied for Russia, still looking at the floor. That roughly translates to, announce his death. It will cause Russia to go back, so we'll get ready to leave after today's negotiations. Do what you think is right, Rus.
И Сербия, если хочешь, скажи другому охраннику, чтобы он выполнил за тебя приказ.
Russia added in, looking outside the window that gave a clear view into the garden outside. That roughly translates to, and Serbia, if you wish, you may tell another guard to execute the order for you. Voi Lubovian. That roughly translates to, you are dismissed. Serbia bowed and left the room, leaving Russia and Estonia alone once again. The two sat in silence for quite a few minutes. The birds outside and conversations in the corridor, the only things they could hear.
Когда я закончу эту встречу, мы немедленно уйдем.
Russia announced, finally breaking the silence. That roughly translates to, when I'm done with this meeting, we'll leave immediately.
Kas sa kasukat ei vaheta? Nad teavad, kes sa oled.
Estonia replied, worry plastered on her face. That roughly translates to, you won't change your coat? They'll know who you are. Kas se tark mote? That roughly translates to, is that a smart idea?
Я буду там царем, плюс в обществе должны произойти перемены. Нам не следует прятаться, это glupо.
That roughly translates to, I'll be their Tsar, Plus, there needs to be a change to society. We shouldn't be hidden. It's stupid. Before Estonia could reply, Russia walked out of the room and into the corridors, heading towards the meeting room. He quickly noticed that he forgot his fur hat, but he didn't turn around. He couldn't be bothered to. He just had to hope Estonia grabbed it for him, so he could wear it when they leave. He kept the same pace, passing many guards who all gave him the same look, one of immense confusion with worry mixed in between. He ignored them all, reaching one door to the meeting room. He turned and pushed them open and was greeted by the other prince, who sat in his chair, waiting for Russia. Russia noticed that his brother wasn't outside, but he'd ask once he sat down. He shut the doors gently and pulled the chair out, sitting down and looking at Britannia's crown prince. "Where was your brother?" Russia asked, starting the conversation off. "He's strolling around the palace somewhere. I heard you sent your guard back to Muscovy. What was with that?" "I'm sure you've heard." "Heard what?" "About your family." "Yes, I'd like my nephew and brother back." "Consider it done," Russia responded, leaning back in his chair. America just stared at him in return, utter disbelief on his face. "Что? You're just going to give them back? What about your dad?" Russia twiddled his fingers, trying to figure out whether he should tell the truth or a lie. America still kept his eyes sharp on Russia, pressing him for an answer. Feeling pressured, Russia decided to answer vaguely. "You'll hear about why soon," he answered, still fiddling with his fingers under the desk. With that, Russia said his final goodbye and exited the room. When he arrived to the stables where his horse was, Estonia had their luggage and his hat in her hand, throwing it at him. He caught it and put it on, saddling their horses and putting the luggage on the horse Estonia would ride.
Parem looda, et see plaan töötab.
That roughly translates to, "You better hope this plan works." "Если нет, я его убью его сам." That roughly translates to, "If it doesn't, I'll kill him myself." Chapter 8. Murder. "Mama, where's father?" "Don't worry about it, Latvia, dear. Go find Estonia. I'm sure she'll play with you." The little girl nodded and ran off, leaving the mother alone. The mother looked around the room, squinting when the light from the large windows passed and met her eyes. She wore a white silk dress that had gold and blue flowers around her chest and the rest of the dress. The top of her dress hung a bit low, exposing the top of her chest, and puffy sleeves hung off her shoulders. She had diamond-like jewels embedded in her dress, earrings, and necklace. In fact, they were probably all diamonds. She had blonde hair tied up in a bun, allowing it around her neck and shoulders to be exposed. She had a flag, one comprising of golden yellow background and an off-centered bright red-colored cross. She had silk gloves pulling her look together, as she had taken her crown off earlier and left it on her throne.
Привітання, мама. Російська гвардія вернулася додому, але Росія і Естонія ще у дорозі.
That roughly translates to, "Hello, Mom. Russia's guard returned home, but Russia and Estonia are still on their way." The woman turned to see a much younger girl, her face encompassed in worry.
Ён сказаў, што Расія накіравала яго раней, каб знайсці бацюшку, але сказаў, што прычына канфідэнцыйная.
That roughly translates to, he said Russia sent him ahead earlier to find father, but said the reason is confidential. Tell him he is in the throne room. She replied, allowing the girl to leave and let the mother be alone once again. She sat down on her chair and allowed herself to lose her composure, leaning her head back. She was still tired, worn out, and she was practically done with life. "Mom, come quick, it's important," a male called from down the hall. The woman dreaded the call, but obliged anyway, getting up and leaving the room, heading towards the voice. She kept a brisk, steady pace as she approached the throne room, where her son called her from. When she walked in, she saw it. Blood everywhere. And there he was, Russia's royal guard, standing over the now dead person, her husband.
Я выполнил поручение, полученное от Его Величества, наследного принца России.
Was all he said, keeping bearing. That roughly translates to, I have fulfilled orders I received from His Majesty, Crown Prince Russia.
Мама, мне так шкада, я не хацеў, каб гэта адбылася.
That roughly translates to, Mom, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean for this to happen. The woman heard footsteps behind her, but she didn't turn around. Her husband was dead. She forced herself to feel remorse, although she was glad he was dead.
Я новый царь Московии.
A voice announced, stepping forward past the woman. That roughly translates to, I am the new Tsar of Muscovy.
Его правление террора закончилось, пришло время это изменить. Украина, объявите об этом, пожалуйста. Я говорю, что моя коронация через 3 дня.
That roughly translates to, his reign of terror is over. It's time to change this. Ukraine, announce this, please. I say my coronation is in 3 days. Russia! How could you? He was your father! She exclaimed, stepping forward to her son. Moyova, Zanyam Pujimo, was his reply, not turning around. That roughly translates to, we both know why. He grabbed the crown off his dead father's head and placed it on his, turning to face his family. There was no sign of regret, happiness, or sadness in his face. It sent shivers down the woman's spine, causing her to step back a bit.
Мой первый указ – немедленно положить конец этой войне. Это продолжается слишком долго, пора дать нашему народу шанс на жизнь.
That roughly translates to, my first decree is to end this war immediately. It's gone on for far too long. It's time to let our people get a chance at life. Your Highness, Tsarina Kalmar, it's best if we leave. You should be having your child soon. We don't want to risk it here. Kalmar turned to face a shorter woman who had her hands folded together, her head dipped down. A little tight bun was put together on the back of her head, with a braid wrapping around it. She had dark, practically black hair, much like Russia, which hinted at his Asian heritage. She wore a yellow dress, which resembled that of the other maids, but at least hers had color. All right, thank you, Philippines. We'll leave now. The two left the throne room quickly. Just as quickly they made their way to the nursery. Sweden knew Philippines would pull her away in order to save her mental health, but she couldn't be more grateful for it. Her child wouldn't be due for another month, but she didn't care. Once they reached the nursery, Kalmar immediately sat down in a chair and relaxed herself. From now on, her life would be extremely stressful and non-stressful at the same time. Chapter 9. Problems. King Britain, I have news from Prussia. America looked over to see a knight running in, getting onto his knee once he reached the foot of the thrones. America was sitting next to his father, his mother not present. Kaiser German Empire has declared war on us, the knight announced, this earning him an angry sigh from Britain. Thank you, Alexander, he called to the servant who had just entered the room. Please fetch Canada and send him here. Both the knight and servant left the room, and America slumped into his seat. Fucking backstabbers, those Prussians are. Don't ever trust a Prussian, America. They're nothing but a kingdom of liars. America nodded in response, directing his gaze outside the windows. He watched a bunny hop around a bush full of flowers, it occasionally stopping to sniff some, then continuing on its dance. He was so focused on the bunny he didn't notice his brother entering the room. Canada and Britain had started talking already, but America now set his eyes on a butterfly. The butterfly landed on the bunny's nose and sat still, as if both knowing if they moved, they'd scare each other. A bunny and a butterfly, two delicate animals, sat in stillness as the gardeners and servants walked around them. Both were protected, safe. Both were safe with each other, being a sight to behold. America, a voice called, breaking his thoughts. Yes? Britain rolled his eyes and told America everything they had talked about, catching him up. He listened intently, though he desperately wanted to look at the bunny and the butterfly again. Instead, all he was paying attention to was about what was the appropriate action. Did Russia say why they declared? Canada asked, sitting on Mother's throne. Did the Kaiser go insane? I don't know, their father responded, taking the crown off his head and setting it on the arm of his throne, rather harshly. Britannia cannot afford another war. We've taken too many casualties, and the costs of the war against Muscovy was seeming to be expensive. I don't know what we Bretons have done, but we surely didn't deserve this. Maybe the Kaiser made a secret deal with the Tsar of the Russian Empire, that if they can't take our kingdom out, then they will. Your Royal Highness, you've received news from the Emirate of Haiel, a guard announced, entering the room. What is it? Sultan Saudi Arabia has announced that the Emirate of Haiel will be fighting alongside ours in this war against Prussian aggression, and will be sending troops immediately to get in the front line. What a relief, Canada muttered. Thank you, Daniel. You're dismissed. With that, the guard left the room, and the three men sat in silence. America turned to the window again, and was saddened when the bunny and the butterfly were gone. He turned back to his father and brother, who were in a deep conversation, and decided to listen, as now he had nothing better to do. Reason why a brand new ruler who doesn't have their heir yet would even join us in this war. Leave it alone, Canada. Send Malaysia to Haiel. She's been there already now, and so I'm sure she would know what she's doing. Please, go bring your mother and come back with her. This is urgent. Canada nodded and stood up, walking away from the two. America watched him leave, wanting to follow him, but for some reason, to do something else. He didn't know what, but he felt as if he needed to do it. Father, America started speaking finally after a while. Maybe we can talk to the new Tsar of Muscovy, or Emperor of Tokugawa, so they won't declare war on us as well. Britain stared at his son. America couldn't tell if it was in anger or thought, but he was now scared. He felt as if he suggested the wrong thing. That he suggested a stupid thing. We'll try to make it work. You'll go to Muscovy, you've already met the Tsar, and I'll have Australia go to Tokugawa. Go get ready. America gave a silent nod and walked away into the hallway, heading towards his room. He assumed he'd have a guard to get Australia and bring him to Father, but didn't want to head back and ask. He reached his room fairly quickly and opened the door, immediately heading towards his wardrobe to pull his luggage out and pulled what he needed to bring. He grabbed some clothing, a messenger box, and a bottle of liquor and bourbon whiskey, and closed his luggage shut. He opened it back up and set his hat inside and shut it once again. He decided to wear his crown instead. He grabbed his crown and set it on his head. He grabbed his luggage and headed into India's room. "Hey, India, may I ask a favor, please?" The woman opened her door and allowed America to step inside, sitting on a chair. "Leaving again?" she asked, applying makeup to herself while staring in a reflection in the mirror. "What's the reason this time?" "Negotiations with Muscovy. Prussia declared war on us." She looked at him and nodded, grabbing a red, white, and gold accented veil, turning to face him. "It'll match your uniform better, and this one will fasten to your crown," she explained as she put the flashy veil on his crown. "These pins will also blend into your crown. So all you need to worry about is the attention you're attracting for being out of the palace again, not having your face showing." As she finished putting the pins in, she stepped back and tugged on the bottom of the veil a bit, making sure it wouldn't slip if anything happened. Once she was content, India pulled America into a hug. "Stay safe in Muscovy. Burma looks up at you. Stay safe for him." "I will," America promised, pulling away from the hug. "I will." Once they said their goodbyes, America left the room and grabbed the luggage he left sitting outside the door. He began to walk towards the stables once more, doing a more quick check while on his way. "Do I have my saber? Yes. I have my crown and veil. Yes. I put my cap and my luggage and a change of clothes in case. I got alcohol. Shit. Water." America took a detour to the kitchen and grabbed a few canteens of water and then continued on to the stables. Once he got there, he saddled his horse and packed up his luggage and got on, heading out to the village. "All right, just ride on. Let the people get out of the way," he told himself, mentally preparing. He trotted his horse into the main street of the village, holding himself high as he did so. He made sure his back was straight and his shoulders were back so his posture was great and he could see where he needed to go. Crowds immediately attracted to him, but he kept his horse moving. When the horse started slowing down, America pulled out his saber and held it in front of him, in order to intimidate the crowd. People immediately began to open up a pathway in the beginning, but they would soon stop the further he went. "Move!" he commanded, sticking his saber out in front of him, having the tip pointing at the crowd in front. The crowd quickly moved and left the path, sticking to the side as the street as America rode through. He sheathed his sword, allowing the horse to trot again as he grabbed both the reins. "Let's go see that damn Tsar," he mumbled to himself. His vision widened from the veil. "Since Britannia is in a state of everlasting war." Chapter 10. Front Lines. Canada rode on his horse to a tent in the middle of a prairie, undisturbed by the lack of sounds. He was nearing the main battlefront, but this tent he needed to stop at was the commander of the military. He dismounted his horse and entered the tent, immediately being treated by a couple generals huddled around a table. "Good morning, Sir Canada," a man greeted, causing the rest to face him. "We were just trying to figure out a way to hold the lines." Canada nodded and looked down at the map, examining it carefully. "So, they're trying to flank our men, huh? All right. Well, we'll keep the men where they are. The troops from Hyle should be arriving soon and help reinforce our line." "Yes, sir. General York, will you relay the message?" "On it." Canada dismissed the other generals to go off and do their own thing, while he continued to stare at the map on the table. There were 2 maps on the table, one with the border of Prussia marked with battle plans and moved fronts and places of units. The other, however, was a map of Britannia showing the borders where the units were and when they'd get to the lines. He noticed some units were staying on the borders of the other nations, and he didn't blame his generals for keeping them there, but he knew he could move them. "General Penn," Canada called, bringing the man back into the tent. "These men are on the borders. They shouldn't be there. We are close with Tokugawa. The Emperor or heirs wouldn't attack us." "But Muscovy, sir. What about them? We don't know their new czar, so he can be unpredictable." "America has formed a friendly relationship with him when he was in Hyle for discussions. He's been sent to Muscovy to talk with Tsar Russia and keep us at peace. Right now, keep some troops there, but most likely we'll be able to remove them." The general nodded in response and began to re-examine the map, figuring out what to do next. He called for a colonel to be brought into the tent. "Sir Canada, this is Colonel Castiello. He'll be relaying the message to the troops at the Tokugawa border." "Pleasure to meet you, Your Highness," the colonel said, reaching his hand out. Canada accepted his hand and shook it, greeting the other back. "I've been told you have a mission for me. I will fulfill it to the best of my abilities." "Thank you. I need you to tell the troops at the Tokugawa border to make their way to the front lines. If you happen to cross paths with troops coming from Hyle, tell whoever's in charge to stop at this tent, but the rest of them can continue going." "I understand, sir. You may leave." Canada watched as both men left, a heavy sigh leaving his body. He looked back down at the map, his eyes locking onto the listed units on the border with Muscovy. Canada put his hand in a pocket and pulled out a set of prayer beads, holding them in his hands firmly. He bowed his head, praying quietly that America would succeed and they could finish this war with as little casualties as possible. "Sir, you're going to have to see this." Canada quickly finished his prayer and put the beads back in his pocket and left the tent. He was immediately greeted by a massive army coming on the horizon. "And what the hell am I looking at? It looks like a herd of angry cattle." "That's the army Hyle sent, sir." The general stepped up next to Canada and let out a sigh of relief. "I am unsure of what you, Her Majesty Princess Malaysia, or His Majesty Crown Prince America did in Hyle, but whatever it was, it helped us a lot." Canada kept his eyes fixed on the approaching crowd. He knew he had to write to his father about the volunteers Hyle's Sultan sent, but he wanted to figure out the amount from their general first. Then something hit him. He knew Hyle's general in command would be there. "Hey, all of you, they have a general in command, and he's a bit of a dick, so try to please him. If he threatens any of you, I need one of you to get me immediately. I'll be in the tent. Oh, and his name is Egypt, but you'll refer to him as General in Command Egypt. Despite most of you being generals, he's just stuck up. A bit of an ego, eh? A general joked, earning laughs from the rest of the group but Canada. Canada ducked back into the tent and began mental preparations for the man he was about to meet. He met Egypt while in Hael, but he hated every bit of that man. He sat down in a chair and pulled out a messenger kit and began writing his letter, knowing damn well that Egypt would give him so much of a headache he couldn't write it after. Now all he had to worry about was making sure Egypt doesn't kill his officers and America in Muscovy. Chapter 11. Begging. Thank you for coming, Honduras. You're a wonderful guard, I must say. I appreciate it, Crown Prince, the guard replied. America looked down the street, many people staring at him from the side of the street as the guard trotted down on horseback. They seemed curious. A veiled man and a guard from a country they were previously at war with, now in their city, but they stayed to the side, out of America's way. In front of them, an off-white Alcazar stood grand in the middle of the city. It stood out amidst the colorful buildings of Muscovy. He was sure he'd write this to his father, as it was the first time he'd seen such colorful buildings. Tokugawa focused on wooden architecture and would have red-colored buildings if they were of importance, or would remain the color of the wood, or white. Hael had a use of white and beige buildings, and would use blues and golds. Prussia and Britannia, on the other hand, used gray and brown tones, as they used stone and wood often, sometimes marble. This all made Muscovy seem like a strange new place, as even buildings outside the cities and small village used these colors. Crown Prince, there's knights ahead. America looked forward to spot these knights, but it wasn't only them. Russia rode behind them, accompanied by his sister, Estonia. He was now worried, forgetting Russia was now Tsar. Hopefully, they didn't make a scene. Привет, America, Russia greeted in a rather friendly tone. He then looked at America's guard, Honduras, and spoke once more. Why have you two traveled here? America understood why he wasn't going to let him talk. They were in public. But America did scream at his own people so he could leave before Honduras accompanied him, as per his father's word. We have an important request made to be handled in private quarters, Honduras replied. Russia nodded and turned his horse, telling them to follow him, and his guards to flank the two. They complied and followed Russia, America actually trotting up next to him to talk to him. I'm terribly sorry about this all of a sudden. You've just recently become Tsar, he whispered, doing his best to keep his composure and face straight ahead. You are always welcome here, Russia replied, taking America by surprise a bit. How urgent is this discussion, however? I do have to talk with my brother. I'd say very urgent, but it should be quick, America replied quietly, turning to face him. Хорошо, поговорим.
Как только вернемся.
That roughly translates to, alright, we'll talk as soon as we get back. The rest of the trip was in silence till they entered the stables on castle grounds, when they were getting America and Honduras's horses situated. Estonia, can you have Afghanistan meet with America's guard and take him to the guard's quarters? on it. Soon enough, America was in a room with only Russia and a table separating them, though Russia did not sit down. America flipped his veil up so he could see Russia clearly, and he could see America. What's the matter? Kaiser German Empire has declared war on us. We're hoping you could help us by declaring a non-aggression pact with us. Of course, but no help troop-wise. Hayao and Tokugawa are already sending us troops. As so we heard, and actually, Father was hoping I could stay here in case we need to request other things. Russia pondered for a minute, walking to where America sat, and leaned his back to over table, almost sitting on it. You are welcome to stay, but you would have to share a room with me. Mor has had too many kids, and Latvia is going to get her own room tomorrow. If that doesn't bother you, then you can stay. Mor roughly translates to mother. Now it was America's turn to ponder. He figured there would have been an open room, but it was his father's he shared with his mother, most likely, so his mother would be staying in her room, leaving Russia to stay in his. But it wouldn't be bad, he thought, as he did seem to get along well with Russia. Would I be sleeping on a Davenport of some sort? Niet, I will be sleeping there. You would get my bed, as you are the guest. Well, I really don't want to kick you off your own bed, America muttered in reply, leaning his head back in the chair. Both males went silent, as they were both conflicted on the issue, but they didn't know how to solve it. America contemplated suggesting they just share the bed 50-50, but he was worried it would be seen as weird. Your Majesty, it's Sardina Kalmar, a butler announced, bursting into the room. America flipped his veil back over and followed Russia out of the room, who quickly followed the butler. They were practically running in the halls, and America quickly asked if he should follow, which responded in a yes. They stopped in front of a door where all but one of Russia's siblings were. America decided this is where he stepped back as Russia made his way to the door. But the Soviet Union stepped out of the room, making his appearance.
Мать мертва. Она умерла в преждевременных родах.
That roughly translates to, Mother is dead. She died in a premature labor. America watched the faces of everyone turn from worry to anguish, but nobody had it worse than Russia, who stepped back to stand next to America. After some talk, Russia placed a hand on America's back and began walking, pushing him along. America walked with him and was brought to what could only be assumed to be Russia's room. Take a seat. You might want to write to your parents. America couldn't help but notice a tone when he mentioned his parents, leading America to believe Kalmar had passed away. Russia, he started, taking his veil off and stepping closer to him. I don't speak Russian. Can you tell me what happened? Russia hesitated, but nodded, sitting on the edge of his bed, America joining him. My mother, Sarina Kalmar Union, was pregnant and wasn't due for another month. But she went into labor this morning, apparently, to none of our knowledges. We now have another sister, but mother passed away. I'm so sorry, America replied immediately, feeling guilty over asking. He wrapped his arms around Russia, pulling him into a hug as to give him as much comfort as the now mourning male comfort would need. Russia let himself loose and held America back, failing to hold in sobs. causing America to tell him it was alright to cry. This let Russia completely let himself go and let it all out, holding America as tight as he could. America decided he would leave this out of his letter and just mention Kalmar's death. Chapter 12. Change. Russia slowly opened his eyes, groaning as he did so, slightly pushing himself up. The blinds were closed just enough so that the light wouldn't shine on his face, but from the looks of it, it was morning once more. He quickly realized he was still in his uniform and decided to stay in it, just fixing minor issues here and there. Walking outside, he realized he would have to address the townsfolk, so he decided to go find his brother. Good morning, Russia. Soviet has arranged a speech for you at the town hall square today, afternoon. Russia turned to his sister. A look of sorrow hid under the tiny signature smile of hers. Russia only grabbed her and pulled her into a hug. Извините, пожалуйста, was all he said as she let herself hug Russia back. That is the incorrect translation of I'm sorry. It actually means excuse me, please. Russia? Russia turned his head to see a smaller girl wearing a white button-up shirt and a red and white skirt hugging her waist. She wore a thick necklace around her neck, under the shirt collar, and a gold belt tied around in the front sat above the top of the skirt so you couldn't see where it ended. A white and red shawl hung over her shoulders and hid the majority of her body. Da, Latvia? Russia asked, still holding on to Estonia. Where's Mama? Estonia pulled out of the hug to look at Latvia. They hadn't told her. Shit. Estonia walked over to Latvia and shooed her away. Probably for the better. So Russia left. Quickly, Russia found himself in the planning room, knowing his brother would be there, and he was correct. Zadarovasa, Russia.
Вы уже слышали новости из Эстонии?
Soviet asked, staring at a group of papers on the table. That roughly translates to, Hello, Russia. Have you heard from Estonia yet? Da, вы видели британцев? Russia replied, looking at the papers on the desk. They were plans for the speech Russia had to do. The Russian roughly translates to, Yeah, have you seen the Britons? Он в Беларуси. That roughly translates to, He's with Belarus. Правильно. Спасибо. Russia replied, leaving the room immediately. That roughly translates to, Right, thank you. Soviet hated him now. He killed his own father, but his father was an abuser, a rapist. How could Soviet Union even like him? If it weren't for his father, his mother would be alive right now. He would have his mother. He wanted his mother. Too fucking bad. Russia stood in front of a large crowd. They were silent, waiting for him to say something. He had to address them, but the thought of him messing up was weighing him down. It didn't help that America was watching him, hidden among a group of guards. Once the last few people settled down and focused on Russia, he knew he had to speak. The crown that sat on his head was daring to fall, only being held by some pins and hidden ribbons that Ukraine was sure wouldn't fail. A bit too much trust she had in tiny, fragile things, and Russia had no trust at all.
Добрый день. С великой скорбью сообщаю, что царица Кальмар Юнян, моя любимая мать, скончалась прошлой ночью во время родов.
Russia announced, holding any feelings back, trying his best to look strong. That roughly translates to, "Good afternoon. It is with great sorrow that I bring the message that Tsarina Kalmar Union, my beloved mother, has passed away in labor last night."
Однако мы приветствуем в семье еще одного принца, принца Литовского. До дальнейшего развития событий он является следующим наследником.
That roughly translates to, "We do, however, welcome another prince to the family, Prince Lithuania. He is, until further developments, the next heir apparent." Chatter became more loud as people talked amongst themselves over Russia's announcement, causing Russia's anxiety to be more than apparent, every person in Britannia's combined. "You're doing great," a quiet voice whispered, Russia barely being able to hear. It was America. And, thankfully, he calmed down slightly.
Следующая неделя будет неделей траура по нашей покойной царице Кальмарской унии.
He added, then stepping back to allow his eldest brother to take the floor and announce anything else. That roughly translates to, "This next week will be a week of mourning of our late Tsarina Kalmar Union." Russia hurried off and was immediately yanked down by Ukraine so she could fix his crown.
Це було просто добре, як ти це так зіпсував?
She mumbled, angrily. That roughly translates to, "It was just fine. How did you mess it up so much?" "Udalenia," was all Russia replied. That roughly translates to stress. "I don't think it looked that bad," America added in, causing an annoyed groan from Ukraine. "America is right," a man said, towering over Russia since he was pushed down still. "For your first time, you did great. It was better than any speech Isa can do." That roughly translates to father. The man wore a blue-gray uniform and had his own crown, which sat on his head. "Finlandia! Ty должен быть в Vipuri," Russia exclaimed, making sure he wasn't too loud the townspeople would hear him. That roughly translates to, "Finland, you're supposed to be in Vipuri."
Äitini kuoli ja sain nähdä veljeni ensimmäisen puheen.
Finland replied, placing a hand on Russia's shoulder. That roughly translates to, "My mother died, and I got to see my brother's first public speech." "Lovely to meet you, America. I'm King Finland," he greeted to America, who eagerly shook his hand and introduced himself back. "Actually, Estonia wrote to me about you. Coincidentally, this isn't the first time she's written about your family. She had a lot to say about your sister." "Oh, Malaysia." "That one, yes," he confirmed, while Estonia repeatedly punched his arm. She also noted a brother said they were intimate with some guard here. Estonia immediately stopped punching Finland and said, "They were always around each other." "Trust me, my entire family believes Canada fancied that guard. He's just on the border of Prussia right now, trying not to die." "Oh, you're at war with Prussia, aren't you? How is your father holding up?" "He's awfully stressed," America replied. "He's got mother, though, so he should be fine."
Уберите отсюда всех монархов.
That roughly translates to, "Get all of the monarchs out of here." Suddenly, a large amount of screams came from the crowd. Russia turned around just in time to see an attacker lunge at America with a short sword. Nobody could react fast enough, and America was stabbed. Russia held him as his sisters rushed to provide medical assistance, and Russia just watched America's face through his veil. Panic filled him. He had just allowed the Crown Prince of Britannia to be murdered whilst Britannia gets roped into another defensive war. Then he looked up and saw Soviet. He had a faint smile on his face. Of course, he praised father. He was going to force a woman to marry him if Russia hadn't accidentally interrupted. Which, good for Russia. Soviet ranged the attack. He was just as insane. Chapter 13, Revenge. France walked down the corridor off to the throne room where she was sure her husband was. She was reading letters from all of her children that were abroad now. Canada, Australia, Hong Kong, South Africa, and America. She read through all but America's letter, finishing up Canada's.
Au moins ils sont tous en bonne santé.
France said, pulling America's letter to the front of the stack, sending Canada's to the back. Immediately she knew something was off. It wasn't America's handwriting, nor any of her kids. Perhaps he is ill, and a Muscovite wrote a letter for him. She opened the envelope and took out the letter, opening the folded parchment. She began reading, but couldn't get past the first sentence without stopping. Russia, the new Tsar, wrote the letter. Queen Consort, the Republique Française, and the King United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. I hope this letter finds you both whilst you are in good health, for only bad news will this letter contain. France picked her dress up around her feet and kicked her heels off to the side of the corridor, beginning to run to the throne room. She passed many confused guards and servants alike as she ran past them with the letters in her hand. She quickly pushed open the doors and ran to her now very shocked husband.
Mon amour, c'est l'Amérique. Laissez-moi vous lire sa lettre.
That roughly translates to, "My love, it's America. Let me read you his letter." "All right, but please sit down, my dearest," he replied, guiding France to her own throne. "Hold my hand." France grabbed his hand and set the letters down, grabbing America's letter again. Queen Consort, Republic of France, and the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. I hope this letter finds you both whilst you are in good health, for only bad news will this letter contain. My dearest mother, Kalmar Union, has passed away from complications due to labor. A mix of stress and being preterm, it was much too much for her to handle as she delivered a new son into this world. In more important matters, Tokugawa Shogunate sent armed attackers after your son. During a speech, the attacker slipped through the guards and was able to stab your son. He is in care of our top medical officials. I do not feel as if I can apologize enough, as it was my duty to keep your son, your crown prince, safe. I am by his side as I write this, and I will write again when there's an update. The attacker is a Tokugawan official who was hired by my own brother, General Soviet Union, to kill your son. I am, at this time, discussing with my younger sister, Princess Estonia, about how to correctly address this situation and what to do about my own brother. Again, I am very sorry for this poor news and the sorrow it will cause you. I will do anything in my power to make sure your son stays alive. If there's anything you'd wish me to do, send me a letter. I do not want anyone of your lineage in my kingdom at this time for fear of your safety. Sincerest apologies. Raskite Federace. The Russian roughly translates to Russian Federation. France looked up at her husband, tears swelling in her eyes. Britain just stood there, staring out a window. My love, France muttered, trying to get her husband's attention without startling him. I must ask you to tell Australia what happened. He's not safe in Tokugawa. He needs to be repealed immediately. If there isn't a response by tomorrow night, I will go myself. Mon amour, that isn't the smartest of ideas. Maybe send a letter to Hung. I'm sure he can help. Britain grabbed his wife's hands and sat in his throne right next to hers. He gently placed his forehead against France's, continuing to hold her hands as tightly as he could without hurting her. France, my dearest, Kiwi, our own daughter, has left to go help fight this war. We are no longer safe. This kingdom is no longer safe. We need to make it safe. For our people, for our children, for America, for us. If one of us doesn't step up to fight, we can't be safe. We would be cowards, sacrificing our children's lives, our son, the heir, the person our citizens look up to, has nearly died. It's time we take action. The room stayed silent for what felt like hours, the silence only being broken by some sobs that France failed to hold in. She knew Britain was right, but she also knew that if he died, America is king, and he isn't even in the kingdom, nor will he be for a while. So she made the ultimate choice. Sacrifice. One she knew nobody would like.
Vous devez rester en vie pour notre fils, nos enfants. Je vais me battre, je l'ai déjà fait en Occitanie. Vous devez rester à l'intérieur et en sécurité jusqu'à ce que notre fils revienne ici vivant.
That roughly translates to, you must stay alive. For our son, our children. I will fight. I have already done it in Noctania. You have to stay inside and safe until our son comes back here alive. France, darling, Britain started, lifting a hand to place it on her cheek. Our children need you, their mother.
Quel genre de mère suis-je si je ne me bats pas pour laisser mes enfants continuer à vivre et à voir?
France replied, sitting up and pushing herself to her feet. That roughly translates to, what mother am I if I don't fight to let my kids continue to live and have their own children?
Je rencontrerai le Canada sur la ligne de front demain matin. Je pars m'habiller et me préparer.
Je t'aime. That roughly translates to, I will meet Canada at the front lines tomorrow morning. I'm off to go get dressed and ready. I love you. Je t'aime, was all Britain could say. He was horrible at arguments, hence why he had Hong Kong as his advisor. Je t'aime. That roughly translates to, I love you. France quickly made her way to her and Britain's room, deciding she had to be rather quick. Most people will tell you they've never seen a woman wear a uniform, but since the sun hadn't set yet, it would be most people outside of Britannia who haven't seen a woman wear a uniform, especially when a woman's rank is a general. They were all asleep when Huey left, so they couldn't miss their chance now. Chapter 14. Escape. Nigeria held onto his hat, leaning into the horse, pressing it to go faster. He had to get to Australia. It was urgent. They tried to kill his brother. They needed to pay. His dreads were tied up and out his face, something he was thankful for as his horse raced through the tall grass and wildflowers as the plateau was nearing its end. Underneath, rice fields and hills sprawled out for kilometers. He was at the border of Tokugawa now. He quickly guided the horse down the path to the bottom and made sure to not purposefully mess up the rice fields. If the horse did it itself, then he would slowly guide it back enough just to cause some damage to the crops in the water. Nigeria saw a few farmers watching him, so he stopped accidentally veering into the rice fields. He couldn't say he didn't want the horse to get wet, as it was flooding season in Tokugawa. Halt! Nigeria noticed the 4 cavalry guards ahead of him. He knew riding past them would mean problems, so he rode straight through them, never losing speed. There were a few yells and shouts coming from them in a foreign language, but Nigeria leaned into the horse more, hoping none of them had bows. He quickly outpaced the guards and went straight to the Tokugawan castle. Hurry, get Ozzy back, he told himself, riding into the dense forests. Nigeria slowed down a bit, but not entirely, still wanting to get outside the castle and not have the guards catch him. Insects and birds chirped and creaked throughout the forest, but Nigeria didn't pay attention. If he had time, he would stop and listen, possibly eat something he found, but his brother might be dead. Up ahead, the forest ended. Past the trees, the castle poked out. Behind it, being in the city it sat. The castle had a back entrance only royals knew, and Australia had sent a letter about it, so he knew where it was and how to get in. Suddenly, a sharp, piercing pain was felt on his back shoulder. He looked back to see an archer had shot an arrow into his shoulder blade. Definitely piercing. He kept the arrow in, knowing if he took it out, he would bleed out. He veered the horse repeatedly, making sure nobody could see what he would do next, as arrows flew past him. Those cavalry divisions must have alerted someone. Nigeria spotted the entrance and bolted to it, dismounting his horse as it veered off towards the forest again. He put his hat on and quickly administered first aid on himself. Kare wa koko ni iru yo. That roughly translates to, he is in here. Nigeria quickly packed himself back up, holding his saber as he swiftly and quietly walked down the corridor. There were candles on one side of the wide hall, so he stuck to the opposite side, and low to the ground, limiting his chance of being seen. He heard their voices get lower and lower as he crept off, soon being met by a staircase. He slowly walked up the staircase and was greeted by a door, which he slowly opened. It was behind a curtain which laid on the ground, so he quickly got out and shut the door, hugging the wall. He peeled from behind the curtain and realized he was in the throne room, as Japanese Empire was on the throne. Various guards burst into the room, startling both the Emperor and Nigeria.
ブリタニアの兵士の一人が国境を越えました。私たちは彼に矢を放ったのですが、彼は止まらなかったのです。
That roughly translates to, one of Britannia's soldiers has crossed the border. We've shot an arrow at him, but he didn't stop.
王国を捜索し、封鎖してください。彼らは攻撃が早すぎた。
Nigeria seemed startled by the response, but Japanese Empire continued speaking. That first part roughly translates to, search the kingdom, lock it down. They attacked too early.
オーストラリアに手紙など何も届かないようにして、彼に気づかれないようにしてください。我々にはカナダが必要だ。そして彼が必要だ。私たちは英国の王国を内側から破壊します。
That roughly translates to, do not let any letter or anything arrive to Australia. Keep him unaware. We need Canada out, then him. We'll destroy the Brits' kingdom from the inside. The guards quickly left, and a new person entered the room. One of the consorts Nigeria recognized as Cambodia. She held a tray with a teapot and small cups on it, and 2 small cups. Insert whatever it says. I cannot translate it, and I can't figure out what it says. Nigeria sighed. He didn't understand what language she spoke. Sadly, he sighed a bit too loud as both Japanese Empire and Cambodia were quiet.
何か聞こえましたか?
Japanese Empire asked, his voice awfully low. That roughly translates to, did you hear something? She shook her head and sat down next to him, leaning her head on him. He immediately focused on her and quietly spoke to her while drinking the tea she brought. Cambodia soon fell asleep, waiting for Japanese Empire to hold her until he fell asleep too. Now was Nigeria's time to move, and he quietly left the room. Voices from down the hall were getting closer, so he went the opposite way, which was, thankfully, the right way. He reached a door and swiftly opened it, shutting it behind him as quickly. Australia was laying in a bed in the middle of the back wall, but had shot up upon the sudden entrance. Nigeria, what you doing here, mate? Quiet, they're literally trying to murder us, Nigeria whispered to his brother. Suddenly, a person stirred from under the covers and laid their head on Australia's lap, holding onto him. They were still asleep, but it did cause the 2 to shut up quickly. You're sleeping with someone? He's the general of the army's son, Australia admitted. The youngest of the two. Nigeria walked over to where Australia sat and realized an eye patch covered their right eye, which Nigeria assumed was Strange sleeping with. His mother was abusive, but she's passed away. His father, however, Korean Empire, is still a dick. But to both of his children. The eldest, South Korea, managed to climb a few ranks, but due to North Korea's eye being gone, he's dependent on other people. Pissed his dad off more? You got it. Now, what are you doing here? Prince Soviet Union of Muscovy, the commander of Muscovy's troops, plotted with the Emperor of Japanese Empire to kill us. He said, "We need to destroy them from the inside and kill all of their monarchs," in simple terms. Nigeria explained. "Grab your stuff, quickly. I've already been shot with an arrow. We'll take him. He's probably not safe here." "Got it. Help me before I wake him," Australia said whilst moving out of the bed, kissing the sleeping male's forehead before standing up. "Quickly, they should still be asleep," Nigeria whispered whilst pushing the door open to the throne room. He was correct, and both Cambodia and Japanese Empire stayed asleep, allowing Nigeria, Australia, and their new friend, North Korea, to use the secret passage and leave. "Nige, mate, I trust you, but how are we getting out?" "Theft," was all Nigeria replied, leading the way. Once they left the tunnel, Nigeria quickly made his way to the forest. His horse was still there and came to greet him, which was a huge relief to Nigeria. "North Korea will use my horse. The stable's not too far down. Stay here, I'll be back."
야생마는 더 빠릅니다. 숲에는 많아요.
That roughly translates to, "Wild horses are faster. There's many in the forest." Nigeria and Australia both looked at each other, probably hoping desperately the other could translate. North Korea recognized this and apologized immediately.
野生の馬は速いです。森にはたくさんあります。
Again, it roughly translates to, "Wild horses are faster. There's many in the forest." "Right, lead the way," Australia replied, earning a nod from North Korea, who began leading the horse slowly through the forest. "I'm going to assume he understands English and just doesn't speak it?" Nigeria asked his brother. Somehow, quietly enough, North Korea didn't turn back. "You got that right." "Koko," North Korea announced, allowing them to see the two wild stallions. Both brothers approached the horses cautiously, but were able to mount them. They adjusted their seating and luggage arrangement and began the trip home as quickly as possible. Once they passed the border, they slowed to a trance and trot and joked a bit with each other, Australia having to move North Korea on his horse with him so the other could sleep, allowing more space for luggage, which they utilized. "Brace yourself, Ozzy. You've got a bit of explaining." "Yeah, but right now, America's the focus." "Right," Nigeria agreed, looking up into this dark sky littered with clouds. Thankfully, Tsar Russia did say he'd survive. "Let's pray he's right," Australia replied, resting his head on his sleeping partner. Chapter 15. Duel. Ukraine marched angrily through the halls, her sisters Belarus and Uzbekistan following her, as well as her brothers Finland and Kazakhstan. She was grateful the two left their kingdoms temporarily over the mention of their mother's death, but now they have much bigger things to talk about. Their eldest brother. Russia just let me know that Soviet and the Emperor of Tokugawa tried to assassinate America. Turkmenistan and Tajikistan are heading over to Britannia to talk to their king. The news that Estonia had told them continued to ring in their head. She was pissed. He could have caused them another war and quite possibly abolish Britannia as a whole. Then again, Soviet Union was supposed to be getting married to Princess Japan, the heir of Tokugawa. But since father died, that was pushed away. Yarozamiyo, Ukraine announced, stopping and turning around to face her siblings. That roughly translates to, I get it.
Вони намагаються отримати ще одне королівство для принцеси Японії, оскільки жінка ніколи не була принцесою в Токугаві, залишаючи місце спадкоємця своєму генералу чи його синові.
That roughly translates to, they're trying to get another kingdom for Princess Japan since a woman has never been empress in Tokugawa, leaving the heir spot to their general or his son. Why would they do that? Kazakhstan questioned, showing how almost all of them were confused. Soviet was supposed to marry her. Father went to war to distract the Bretons while Tokugawa and Prussia help. Prussia has to be getting paid then. Ukraine mentally sighed in relief, knowing her sister, Uzbekistan, understood where she was going. Now the question was whether they were right. But did Russia say anything about America? Ukraine spun around to face her sister. She was wearing a white full-length dress, which wasn't too tight but not too poofy. She wore a gold and white vest over her dress and a matching thick belt on her waist. A matching hat with fur on the rim sat on her long hair, a large feather sticking out of the top. She had red skin with a yellow symbol on her flag, right in the middle of her face.
Virolla ei ollut päivitystä.
Finland replied. That roughly translates to, Estonia had no update.
Kas, Uzbek ja minä etsimme isän toimistoa. Kirgisia lukitse itsesi Vialle ja Liettualle. Bella ja Rain jäävät Venäjälle. Tämä on riskialtista.
That roughly translates to, Kaz, Uzbek, and I will be searching father's office. Kreidze, lock yourself with Via and Lithuania in the nursery. Bella and Rain, stay with Russia. This is risky. With that, Belarus and Ukraine were left alone as the rest left to do what Finland instructed them to do. So Ukraine and Belarus left too. Soviet doesn't speak English, and neither do any of the guards, so speak in English, Belarus said, walking awfully close to her sister. He probably knows we're against him. I know, Ukraine breathed out, picking up her pace. Estonia should be with him, so we shouldn't have to worry about her. Right. The two continued their fast walk in silence, Ukraine getting lightheaded as she continued. It was the thought that kept ringing in her mind, throwing her off balance and almost trying to kill her. Suddenly, two guards went running towards the courtyard, so Belarus and Ukraine immediately followed as they knew something was bad. Belarus picked up her dress and ran in front of Ukraine, Ukraine following close behind.
Ты чистое зло. Неудивительно, что отец любил тебя. Ты просто снобистская свинья.
That roughly translates to, you are pure evil. No wonder father loved you. You're just a snobby pig. Ukraine and Belarus immediately stopped once they saw what was happening. Every guard was frozen as well, conflicted on who to help.
Будем надеяться, что твои ссоры лучше твоих оскорблений. И целоваться.
That roughly translates to, let's hope your fighting is better than your insults. And kissing. Soviet Union and Russia stood in the middle of the courtyard with their sabers drawn, staring daggers at each other. Both were dueling, and Ukraine and Belarus had to hold from helping Russia. On the other side of the courtyard, the rest of their siblings, who were present in the kingdom, stood, watching, minus the newborn.
Ты чертова сука. Вам никогда не предназначалось иметь родословную. Королевство предпочло бы, чтобы ты умер, чем был заключен в тюрьму, и я предпочел бы быть тем, кто прольет твою кровь.
That roughly translates to, "You fucking bitch, you were never meant to have a lineage. The kingdom would rather have you dead than imprisoned, and I'd rather be the one who sheds your blood." That statement drove Soviet over the edge, as Soviet lunged at Russia. Russia dodged him, and now the duel has commenced. Russia and Soviet attacked each other, but always dodged the moves, leaving no clear winner at all. The sound of the sabers clinging and ringing in the air, the sound of frustrated grunts accompanying it. Out of the corner of her eye, Ukraine spotted movement on the path behind Russia. A very sick-looking man stood there, total fear or sorrow present in his face. His hair was all messy, his eyes were tired, his cheekbones clearly visible. It was America, and he was most likely malnourished considering he had been asleep for a week. Bella, America dvoится. That roughly translates to, Bella, America is watching. Belarus turned her head immediately to see America, then her eyes widened. She grabbed Ukraine's hand and pulled her through the still guards where America stood. Their siblings noticed and joined them, creating a barrier just in case Soviet decided to attack him. Kazakhstan, Finland, and Uzbekistan drew their own sabers, keeping watch intently. "You need to eat," Kyrgyzstan said, handing Estonia their little brother. "Here, eat this." She took out a wrapped-up package from her pocket and opened it, showing some prizoki in it. She handed it to America, who was now sitting down thanks to Belarus. He didn't take them, nor really acknowledge that they were for him. The woman continued to try and feed America, worry quickly settling over them more than it should have. After a few more tries, Kyrgyzstan gave up, so Ukraine decided she'd try.
Америка, будь ласка, їж це для Росії.
That roughly translates to, "America, please eat these for Russia." To her pleasure, it worked, but probably because he heard her say Russia. He slowly took a bite of the meat-filled pastry, trying to catch looks at Russia and Soviet's duel. As he did so, sadly for him, thankfully for everyone else, Ukraine and Belarus blocked his view. Once he finished, a group sigh was released, relief over America eating washing over them.
Где он? Позволь мне увидеть его. Америка?
That roughly translates to, "Where is he? Let me see him. America." Russia quickly maneuvered around his sisters and hugged America, not caring about the blood on his uniform or the saber he still held. Latvia took the saber, and his siblings surrounded him, choosing to ignore their dead brother. Ukraine stole a look at it. She immediately regretted it, forgetting she hates blood. At least now, America and Russia are safe. He kissed him. That's what he meant, Belarus muttered, leaning over to Ukraine. "I'll announce the duel tomorrow morning." "I'm glad you both are okay, but let's get you to Russ's room and get you food, water, and sleep," Kazakhstan said, moving out of the way. Russia broke from the centuries-long hug and stood up, bringing America up with him. Ukraine watched her siblings light up slightly, knowing that Russia had found someone he loved. Ukraine couldn't help but be proud of her little brother, considering he just put his life on the line for his. "Mitsno trame yoho," Ukraine said to Russia, patting his back. That roughly translates to, "Hold him tight."
Він буде любити вас, поки ви не перестанете його любити. Поводя з ним правильно.
That roughly translates to, "He will love you till you stop loving him. Treat him right." Chapter 16, Breakthrough. Canada stared daggers at Egypt as he complained about basically everything, but mostly control. Egypt commanded the troops up north while Canada commanded the troops down south. This pissed off Egypt because he deserved to be in command of every Haïleti and Breton troop on the front lines, as Egypt was older and more experienced, and just superior to Canada, which many Breton officers and soldiers would disagree about, and a few Haïletis when they knew they wouldn't die. "I should be in charge. You're only a kid." "First of all," Canada snapped, standing up, "I'm 20. Second of all, who the hell said you were qualified enough to lead anyone? You're just a selfish whore whose ego blinds him so much he can't see everyone hates him and would love him to be dead. If you believe you're so powerful, why don't you attack the Prussians yourself? Third of all, you should be fucking grateful I let you command any troops in my war. This war is Britannia's, not Haïli's. Learn your fucking place, Egypt. None of my officers nor my troops will refer to you as your title. They won't even mention your name. You don't deserve shit." Canada finished, sitting back down. Both men remained quiet, and a few officers from both sides not knowing what to do. For one, no one has seen Canada snap like that. At least, nobody he wasn't related to. Secondly, Egypt didn't even try to fight back. Something that was completely unlike him. Suddenly, a soldier burst into the tent, sweat beads dripping down his face, and it was red. "Sir, a report from the south. We've broken through their lines. General Hartmann, who was down there, ordered a flood of troops to breach through and get as far as they can," he announced, gasping for breath as he did so. "The orders are approved. Send any extra divisions down there," Canada replied, his tone rough and still pissed. "Canada," a female voice said, outside the tent. A woman then stepped in, a stern look on her face as she wore a uniform, her rank stating she was a general. "Mama, what are you doing here? You were supposed to be with Z on the front lines. That's what you said you were going to do." "We've made a breakthrough. I came to report it, as your sister is in charge down there." Before France could speak again, another woman burst into the tent. She seemed out of breath, but was definitely a foreigner. Canada jumped up and drew his saber. France gave him a stare, telling him to sheath it. He complied and sheathed it, but kept his hand on the handle in case, as she was armed. "Hello, I'm terribly sorry. I'm Princess in Kyrgyzstan of Muscovy. Sorry for the intrusion." "How's my son?" France asked quickly, immediately softening once she knew who the intruder was. "America is fine. He'll survive. He's supposed to be waking up soon, and the doctors were able to prevent an infection. However, most likely now, Russia or Soviet Union is dead. One of them are. It's possible my entire family, but Tajikistan is dead, as Russia and Soviet have dueled at noon." "If Tsar Russia is dead," an officer spoke up, "who would be your new Tsar?" The princess hesitated for a minute, thinking of what to say or how to say it. She was at a loss for words, not knowing how to answer the officer. "This is why we watch what we say, Damascus," Egypt harshly whispered to the officer, causing Canada to stare daggers once again. Just this time, he would take action. "Leave him alone, fucker," he yelled, pushing Egypt firmly, gently pushing the officer behind him. "Canada, Egypt, sir, down this instant," France commanded, obviously annoyed at the two. "Please, Turkmenistan, continue." "Crown Prince Lithuania," Kyrgyzstan mumbled, loudly, folding her hands together. Unless Russia writes out a law stating that women are able to rule, until then, our weak old brother is the crown prince. Which sister would be in line if she were able to hold that position? France asked. Belarus, Kyrgyzstan replied, actually being able to answer her quickly. Canada and Egypt, however, weren't paying attention to the two women, but rather staring at each other with piercing eyes. Hell, if they stared at anyone else the way they're staring now, people would assume they're stealing every bit of soul and life from them, leaving them with only death. Egypt got ready to stand up when he put his hand on his saber's handle again. Another person entered the tent. So sorry to intrude. Hello, Mother. I've gotten news from Father. Canada looked at his sister, Malaysia, but immediately turned away to stare at Egypt once more, keeping eye contact with him. Egypt kept his face stern, Canada keeping his fierce. Conversations around them, whether they were planning, asking a princess another question, or something else, but the two didn't partake in any. They continued keeping eye contact forever, who knows how long. Then a guard violently shook Egypt. He looked over and saw a man in the tent. Iran. Oh shit. Sir Iran, a pleasure to see you. France greeted cheerfully, standing up to shake his hand. What's brought you here, rather than the palace? Egypt, he repeated coldly, staring at the man. I have news. You can no longer fight for the status of heir, as Saudi Arabia has a child on the way. Oh, that's delightful, France said, completely ignoring the tone and the facts. You should definitely be at the palace where it is safe, Malaysia butted in, Kyrgyzstan off to the side and nodding. It is difficult to remember some men can have children, she muttered to Turkmenistan as if she were embarrassed about it, but it seemed to wash away when Kyrgyzstan agreed. Congratulations, was all Egypt said, returning the tone and stare back at the shorter man. Canada, on the other hand, was unsure of anything to say. Does he congratulate or does he stay silent? Which is the option he temporarily chose. Does he go the route Malaysia took and tell him to get somewhere safe? He's safe here. We've made a breakthrough in the south with both Kiwi and Hartmann's battalions. In fact, I do believe I need to head down there and see how the battles are going, Canada said, standing up and putting his hat on his head, heading towards the tent's door. There were a few complaints and objections, but Canada ignored it all, pushing past Iran and trudging to his horse. France had stormed out and was yelling at him to get back in, saying it wasn't safe for him, but he pressed on, mounting his horse. Je serai en sécurité, je t'aime. That roughly translates to, I'll be safe, I love you. With that, he quickly rode off, keeping the horse at a fast pace. He had tied a string on his cap, so when he rode fast, it wouldn't fall off. And he was really grateful for that now. Mama's gonna kill me once I get back, he mumbled to himself, pressing on towards the battlefields. Chapter 17, Sultan. Quickly, he ran down the corridors, his best friend on his heels. The palace was nearly empty, as most guards were guarding the outside of the palace and any servants weren't needed at the moment. Maybe we shouldn't teach everyone English. Now they can just be confused when we're talking about important stuff. Like what? The man replied, not slowing his pace to talk at all. Egypt, was the other man's reply. From what I've heard, he's doing fine. Saudi, he's literally halted his entire line. Prince Canada was polite enough to give him part of the front, and Prince Canada's troops have broken through the front line, and he's got the hardest front. He's not in complete power, and their strategies. Iran. He'll be safe. He's already written me a letter. He's with King Britain. I know what I'm doing, Turkey. You're a child. Saudi Arabia stopped. He hadn't thought too much about the fact that he'd be a father, only on the war. Turkey continued talking behind him, but he couldn't bear to listen. He had to let Iran leave to a kingdom at war when he was in such a vulnerable state. Saudi, Kurdistan brought you a letter. He turned around and took the letter, opening it quickly. He read through the letter thoroughly, sighing when he reached the end. Recall Egypt and have Iran go to Muscovy. We're at war with Tokugawa Shogunate, he announced, turning around and continuing his way. This time, he was alone. Saudi Arabia walked outside, finding a bench to sit on. He now had to think about something he dreaded. Marriage. He knew the public was very fond of his and Iran's relationship, but he hated planning, and he'd have to get it done before Iran was due, or looked like he was expecting. There were a lot of variables he had to think about. A child, maybe a son, maybe a daughter. Saudi Arabia turned to see a familiar woman next to him. She sat down on the bench next to him, not looking at him. Congratulations, Sultan, she said, having her eyes fixed on a flower bush. Thank you, Malaysia. Which do you hope for? A healthy one. She laughed a bit, turning her face towards him. We've already sent Iran, Tuvalu, India, and Fiji to Muscovy. Now that it's safer for them there, they'll be with America. And why are you here? Multiple reasons. First, I'm relaying a message from Father. Second, I've got news about America. Third, news from Prussia. Saudi Arabia nodded, allowing her to speak entirely. Father wishes you luck on your new journey, and that journey being raising a family. Father can definitely help you if you want. He had a plethora of us children. I appreciate it, Saudi Arabia gratefully said. Thankfully, he had the support of Britannia. America has also woken up, and is expected to make a full recovery really soon, Malaysia announced, a full smile present on her face. He'll survive, and Australia is safe and out of Tokugawa Shogunate now. Saudi Arabia nodded in response, leaning his head back. Malaysia asked if he was okay, but he took a moment to respond. I'm just stressed. It's good stress, I think. Or at least normal. And before you ask, it's about a wedding, a child, and a war. Well, I must say, war is going good, Malaysia responded. I think your stress should go down. Emperor Japanese Empire has declared war on us for our involvement in your war, Saudi Arabia explained. Egypt is being recalled, giving Canada the whole front to deal with. Malaysia was silent, staring off at some plants. She seemed lost for words, and she couldn't seem to find a single word, no matter how hard she tried. Saudi Arabia could understand her. However, Hayao had never fought a war before. They only helped. Hayao is going up with a kingdom with plenty of experience in war. Saudi Arabia was possibly going to lose his empire, his parents' empire, his people's empire. I do believe I'm going to have to lead my own army into battle. Saudi Arabia finished. And your partner? Malaysia quickly said, disbelief heavy in her voice. Your child, Turkey. There are more things to worry about than leading people into a battle that would kill you. It's hard to understand, I know, but they'll all be fine. I can't let anything happen to this kingdom. There's so many children that run in the streets and play in the gardens here, in the palace. They all deserve a life. The best life that can be offered to them. Tokugawa will take it all away. Their freedom, their life. I am willing to give my life so that the future generations of this kingdom can still call Hayao home.
سعودی شما وارد جنگ نمی‌شوید.
That roughly translates to, Saudi, you aren't going into battle. Saudi Arabia turned to see Iran walking towards him. He stood up quickly, surprised that he was there.
من فردا در مسکوی خواهم بود. فقط باید مطمئن شوم که حالت خوب است.
Iran explained, wrapping his arms around Saudi Arabia. That roughly translates to, I'll be in Muscovy tomorrow. I just needed to make sure you were okay.
شما نمی‌توانید به جنگ با ارتش بروید. شما در قصر می‌مانید و در امان خواهید بود. تو هنوز وارث نداری.
That roughly translates to, you can't go to war with the military. You're going to stay in the palace and stay safe. You don't have an heir yet.
أنا آسف جدا.
That roughly translates to, I'm so sorry. It was all Saudi Arabia can breathe out, holding Iran as tight as he could. He heard Malaysia behind them, walking towards them, but not saying anything. Maybe she did say something, but he couldn't hear it. He felt himself fighting tears. Focus on being a dad. Let Turkey and Egypt focus on the war, Malaysia said, standing a good few meters from them, respecting their space. Saudi Arabia didn't even know Malaysia knew Arabic, but he wasn't worried about that. He was worried about what Iran would say next.
من هایل را ترک نمی کنم. من اینجا میمانم مهم نیست. شما چه میگویید؟ تو اینجا به من نیاز داری. با من بهتر میشی. استرس کمتر.
That roughly translates to, I'm not leaving Hayao. I'm staying here, no matter what you say. You need me here. You'll be better with me. Less stress. Saudi Arabia didn't bother arguing. He never wanted to argue with him. He just continued to hold on to Iran, burying his head further into his shoulders. He let his tears fall into his partner's shoulder as another set of footsteps announced their approach, followed by a man speaking to Malaysia and Iran, possibly Saudi Arabia, but he wasn't really listening. He just wanted to hold on to Iran as long as he could. Chapter 18, Comfort. America wobbled through the room, holding himself close to the walls. Russia guided him slowly as he trudged forward. He was slowly regaining his ability to walk, far and without stopping, but he was still in pain all the time. Nice and steady, Russia said quietly, leaning America against him. America groaned as he stepped forward again, the pain in his abdomen only increasing. Russia repositioned his hand, allowing America to set some of his weight on Russia instead of carrying himself for so long. America felt embarrassed, having to rely on the Tsar for support. He should have been back to walking normally now, but he also was cut in his leg, leading to this. The doctor said he had to rebuild the muscle slowly, but fuck did it hurt to do so. Sit down, Russia said, wrapping his arm around America's waist. positioning the Breton air in front of a chair. This fucking sucks, America mumbled, practically collapsing into the chair, if Russia didn't catch him and guide him down. So pathetic. You are fine, Russia replied, sitting down next to America. It takes time. Too long of time for too much pain. Russia gently grasped America's hands, holding them firmly as he brought them to his face. He kissed them both, using it as a way to reassure America. So star-like of you, America joked, leaning his head onto Russia's shoulder. There was something about Russia that was just pure comfort to America. America's bed was full of emptiness, loneliness, and dread. Russia, however, would make a better bed in America's expert opinion. He could talk to him, lean on him, rely on him, and not act like some stuck-up royal around Russia. It was perfect. He was perfect. Only since so much trauma had happened to Russia, whether it was his mother's death or him murdering his father and brother, it seemed to weigh America down too. Only way America could explain it was how you try to take the weight off your husband's shoulder and hold some of that weight so they can have a little comfort. How is the pain? Russia asked, slowly rubbing America's back. I can get the hot rag to place on your stomach and another one for your thigh. That would be delightful. America sighed, pulling himself off of Russia. He watched Russia get up and leave, leaving America alone in the room. He turned his head to spot the bed in the window nook. The bed he slept in. It was Russia's sister's room, but she gave it up to America and chose to sleep in Russia's old room, leaving Russia in what was his parents' room. America slowly pushed himself to his feet, immediately stumbling to the wall. He caught himself as he hit the wall, but he was too late. He slammed into the wall and fell to the ground. America laid there, pain consuming him immediately, causing him to tear up. It hurt so much. Now it was everywhere. He could only wait for Russia and pray he didn't reopen his wounds, while he let himself cry as quietly as possible. Thankfully, the door pushed open and was immediately followed by a man cursing in a foreign language and lifting America up. He picked America up and carried him to the bed, settling him down as gently as possible before going to close the door and grab the basket he brought in. What were you doing? Russia asked, worry consuming his voice. Walk over here and lay down, America replied, groaning as Russia removed his shirt. Russia only shook his head, placing a damp, warm rag on America's wound. He placed his hands on America's waist and asked for permission to remove the pants so he could place a rag on his leg wound, which America gave him. Russia slowly removed his pants, making sure not to hurt or discomfort him, obviously nervous while doing so. Once he had them off, he folded them and set them off to the side with his shirt. Then he placed a rag on the wound, pulling a blanket over America's lower body quickly when he finished. You act like you don't want to see my amazing legs. America snickered, looking at Russia. Russia only rolled his eyes and sat down in the chair that had been next to the bedside. Thank you, America said, reaching his hand over to grab Russia's, just wanting to touch him. Of course, he replied, moving his hand closer to America. America felt Russia rest his head on America's chest, placing his other hand with America's. America closed his eyes, feeling comfort swelling within him. He moved his hand from Russia's and brought it up to his head, brushing a hand through his hair. He knew both of them were too comfortable to move, so he just enjoyed the moment, smiling a bit. Before America knew it, Russia was asleep on him. He had calmed his sleep to America's breathing, so he made sure to keep it consistent. If it slightly changed, Russia would probably wake up, and that would be for the best. But that didn't matter to America. What mattered was how America was realizing how Russia can use him for comfort. It was a relief to him. He wasn't using Russia. It was a mutual feeling. A mutual feeling of comfort, of understanding, of worry. This is what America pictured marriage as. This is what his sister and brother-in-law are like. It's what his parents are like. He even saw it in Saudi Arabia and Iran. If you asked America who he'd rather marry, do not expect a woman's name. Rather, expect Russia's name, or title, as he'd be content spending the rest of his life with this man. Oh fuck, this is what a crush is like, America quietly realized, looking at the sleeping Tsar on him. After a few minutes, America finally grasped a hold of the situation and silently cursed. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't good. How could a crown prince marry a literal ruler? Russia. Russia stirred awake after hearing his name and looked at America, not fully awake yet. Your neck is going to hurt when you wake up. Just get into bed with me. Russia nodded and stood up, stretching himself before he was stopped again by America putting his hand up. Take your jacket and belt off. It'll be more comfortable for me that way as well, he told Russia, turning his head to face him. Russia complied, taking off his uniform jacket and laying it down next to America's clothes. He only took so long to do so because of all the accoutrements, the aguete, making sure they didn't get tangled in itself. He then took out his saber and set it down, taking off his belt then. Once he had it off, he set it down and inserted the saber back into its sheath, placing the belt next to his jacket. Russia sat down and took off his shoes, knowing damn well America would complain about that too. Better, America said, still looking at Russia. Russia then slowly picked America up, pushing him more towards the window before Russia laid down next to him, placing his head on America's chest once again. America wasted no time bringing his hand back to brush through Russia's hair, his other hand being brought up to slowly rub his shoulder. America knew Russia was in pain, emotional pain. As he quickly learned, Russia took guilt upon tragedy fast. He had guilt over his mother's death, although he could have done nothing to prevent it. He had guilt over the attack on America, but he didn't know what would happen. He had guilt on his father and brother's death, although he knew it was entirely necessary and justified. Russia let all these things weigh him down, and it also weighed on America too. Without thinking, America kissed the top of Russia's head, muttering something under his breath. Russia brought his head up to look at America, but quickly set himself back down with a faint smile. America did notice how doing that made the very feeling of comfort increase. So he tapped Russia's shoulder so he'd look at him. Russia did look over at him, only for his lips to be met with America's. It took Russia by surprise, but nonetheless he returned the action, reaching a hand over to America's cheek. Neither man could tell anyone how long that kiss lasted, but it felt like forever to them both. Russia pulled from the kiss, looking at America as he tried to regain a little composure. He grabbed America delicately, holding him close to his chest as he turned over, allowing America to lay on Russia. America took the opportunity to rest his head on Russia's chest, placing his hands just next to his own chest on Russia's stomach in a curled fist. Russia let one arm rest over America's back. The other was playing with his hair, since America's hair had gotten quite curly when it wasn't taken care of entirely. Now, it was the last thought of America's head before he fell asleep on Russia, but it was definitely a thought he could have for the rest of his life. He would definitely be writing back home about the event. Probably only his mother and his sisters Raj and Melee, but only to his sisters would he include that thought. I could definitely sleep with him forever. I mean, his chest makes a really good pillow, and he's so comforting. Not only would I marry him, I'd carry his children in me, however many he wishes to have. God fucking damn it, he's hot. Chapter 19, News. India held the letter tightly in her hand, containing every bit of excitement she held within her by a thread. Raj, supper's in 5 minutes, Australia announced, entering the office she sat in. America's in love. He's what? Australia stepped into the room and was followed by Canada. Canada shut the door while Australia took a seat. Canada sitting in the chair next to him. I thought you were commanding the troops, India said, staring at Canada. Mother is in charge. This war should be over in a few days. We have great cavalry, and our troops on foot are pretty fast. Prussia just learned never to fuck with Brits again, Canada replied, allowing his composure to let out. Now, explain this America is in love thing you've got going on. India nodded, setting the letter off to the side. She apologized in advance if she got far too excited and loud, something she did often, but also because she had to go fast. Okay, America sent Mother, May, and I letters. Only May and I got an extra topic. However, he wrote about an experience he had with another man. Oh my god, is he pulling a nada and sleeping with some guard in Muscovy? Don't give me that. We can go on about Serbia. Better, was India's reply, directing the two men back to her. Russia. Russia. The Tsar. Tsar Russia of Muscovy, Vipuri, and Chigati. Yes, the Tsar. The room was now quiet, both men having to process the information. Australia looked totally lost for words, while Canada appeared to be trying to find the words, failing pretty horribly. Wait, Canada then suddenly announced, standing up. What about the kingdoms? Do they just rule them both once father passes and they're married? Not where I wish you went, Australia groaned. How about, does this mean I can sleep with Serbia forever? Or, now I can have my future husband work with me? So we aren't so dark? Canada immediately slapped Australia's arm and sat back down, sulking in the chair. India laughed a bit, leaning back in her own chair. America has said he kissed him and slept with him, so they are in deep. Hell, let me read you this part, India said, reaching for the letter. Here. India handed the letter to her two brothers, who read the letter together. India watched as their eyes widened around the same time, only widening more the further they read. When Australia handed the letter back to India, Canada stood up and repeated the part of the letter for confirmation, which he received. Oh shit, maybe I can be with Serbia. Out of that entire statement, that's what you got out? The three turned to face New Zealand, who just stood there, arms crossed. Canada merely chuckled a bit, embarrassed to the extreme. Australia was just confused on how New Zealand got in the room, switching his gaze from the door to her and back to the door repeatedly. India, on the other hand, was scared. She wasn't really supposed to tell, but now another sister knows. Oh, supper, right. I'll just tell the family there, India said, standing up. She fixed her sare quickly and walked around the desk and towards the door. The two men followed her as she followed New Zealand to the dining hall. Mother, Hong Kong, and South Africa are all here, and Father has grown quite fond of your lover, Australia. What? The group stopped and turned around, Canada staring at Australia in pure shock. Canada had only been back a day and most likely hadn't bumped into the new face, although it was known that he was awfully shy and stuck around Australia or Britain, whichever one he felt like he wouldn't inconvenience. It also meant nobody wrote to Canada, so they must have all presumed the others would do it. I don't think America or Malaysia knows about him at this point, New Zealand said, rubbing the back of her neck. I don't think so either, because he's all the way down the hall there. I'll be back, Australia said, jogging down the hall. South Africa left the battle to rescue him and ended up catching him in bed with the guy, India explained to Canada. Canada just watched and slowly turned his back to his sisters, a look of confusion completely on his face. Is somebody likes him? The two women burst into laughter, New Zealand having to hold the wall for balance, India holding her stomach and leaning towards the ground. Tears pricked her eyes as she found herself unable to breathe for a few long seconds. What the hell did you just say, mate? Didn't think anyone would like you, Canada replied, turning back to face his sisters. Didn't know you were that much of a joke. Ow! Australia had punched Canada in the arm, crossing his arms right after. Australie no père. I probably butchered the French, but it roughly translates to Australia do not hit your brother. Canada held a smirk on his face after hearing their mother, rubbing his arm where he was hit. India finally was able to pull herself back together, fixing her sare once again. You two should know better. Ozzy, who's this? Did Father not write to you about it? New Zealand exclaimed. Did we write to America about his significant other? Oh, is that so? Does he speak English? He understands English pretty well. Doesn't speak it, Australia replied, grabbing the Korean's hand to provide him comfort. Make sure he does the right thing, France said to him, patting Australia's back. If he hurts you, come tell me and I'll fix him up.
내 생각엔 그 사람이 나에게 상처를 줄 것 같지 않아.
North Korea responded, smiling a bit. That roughly translates to, I don't think he'll hurt me.
나는 한국말을 해요. 걱정하지 마세요.
She reassured, still hugging him. That roughly translates to, I speak Korean, don't worry. You should have told me he was Korean, Ozzy. In his defense, Mother, I don't think any of us knew you could speak Korean, India said, turning around. But I'm hungry, and it's time for supper. India led the group, although New Zealand had caught up and walked alongside her. She didn't question why her sister was wearing her uniform instead of her dress, but she desperately wanted to know the reason. They walked down the corridor in relative silence, only quiet talking from France and North Korea able to be heard in the background. The dining hall door came into view as they navigated the palace's halls. India picked up the pace. 2 men standing outside the doors opened them for the 6, allowing them to walk in. India made her way to her husband and her son, sitting next to Myanmar. Malaysia was to the other side of India, and she couldn't help but notice how sad she seemed. India put a hand on her shoulder, then looked over at her father. Ozzy's got good taste, doesn't he? Vernon asked France, who had just sat down next to him. I do believe North Korea will make a great addition to this family. Mother, Malaysia spoke up. America's got the best lover out of anyone here, to be honest. And why is that, May? He and Sarasra are in love, India answered. The room went quiet fast, Hong Kong dropping his cup before the last noise surprisingly. He broke the silence by complaining about the water being all over him, grabbing his and Australia's napkins. The man who killed his own father to end a war and his brother to keep us out of a war? That Tsar? Yes, the Tsar of Muscovy. That son of yours, Britain, France mumbled, slouching in her chair. He doesn't tell me anything. I'm his mother. Well, I'm sure he was just scared to tell us. He had a reason to trust Malaysia and India, Britain responded, holding her hand. I think it's better if we drop this conversation for something a little better. If America marries Russia, Fiji spoke up, completely ignoring his father. Would Canada marry Serbia? Who told Fiji? See, Kiwi, I can get married now. Father, why did you let him leave the military? I have no idea, Kiwi. I have no idea. Chapter 20. Dagger.
Армия Британии полностью разгромила прусскую армию, заявив о своей победе. Султан Саудовской Аравии заявил, что его война должна закончиться через несколько дней, в том числе благодаря нашим добровольцам. В мире наконец-то должен быть мир.
That roughly translates to, Britannia's army has completely shot down the Prussian military, claiming victory. Sultan Saudi Arabia said his war should end in a few days thanks to our volunteers, as well. The world should finally have peace. Russia leaned back in his chair in relief, throwing his head back as well. Ukraine laughed and continued talking to her siblings while Russia drowned them out. He had lost 3 family members. Only one he actually loved. Fell in love with Britannia's crown prince, learned that Saudi Arabia was expecting a child with Iran, and that he'll be marrying him in a month, and had just received a letter from King Britain saying that he needs to treat his son well, and that was his only wish. And only within a month did all of this happen. Now, peace could finally become a normal thing again, and he could finally feel what life was like. Russia just became the youngest monarch in history, taking the throne when he was 18. Just recently he turned 19, but before he took the throne, Saudi Arabia of Mikhail was 27 when he took the throne 6 years prior. Now, Russia was indulging in a new experience without any help. It scared him. He didn't like it. His mother should have been there. Other monarchs should be there. But there's no peace anywhere. The most peaceful empire was thrown into a war. An already war-ridden kingdom was yanked into another war. Everything just had to be violent. Russia. That roughly translates to Russia. Russia looked up at Ukraine, who was the only person left in the room. Ty idysh. That roughly translates to, are you coming? Niet, was all he answered, earning a sigh from Ukraine before she left the room, closing the door. Now Russia was alone. He looked outside of the window, it overlooking the town. He watched the crowded streets. It looked much better than when Muscovy was at war. Now, instead of only women and a few children in the streets, almost everybody was outside as they finalized their adjustments to life without war. It was rare for these people not to have any men at home anymore, but they were full of happiness now. People getting their fathers and women getting their husbands or brothers back. Very few men from the town remained in the army, as culturally, people in small villages around the kingdom were the men who joined the military. Not just men, however, but also some women too. All Russia had to do now was hope the population would increase. Maybe he'd get rid of or add a few laws to help with that, but for now, he stayed put. Russia. Russia turned around to see one of his sisters standing there, a worried look plastered on her face. She had her hands folded behind her back, which was a sign that something was wrong within the family. Yaponia shul yerda, Uzbekistan mumbled, her voice quivering as she spoke. That roughly translates to, Japan is here. Bazincha u Soviet unshan kwasos olkuichi. Couldn't find anything that would do this properly, but it roughly translates to, she wants to avenge Soviet, we think. Dirmo. That translates to shit. Russia stood up and placed his hand on his saber, making sure it was still there. When he confirmed it was, he followed his sister to meet the Tokugawan princess, wanting to send her out as fast as possible. Princestia Japonia, Rajasthan Hisposi. That roughly translates to, does Princess Japan appear to be violent? Madame. That roughly translates to, I don't know. Russia grit his teeth, an uneasy feeling swelling up swiftly within him. He didn't know what to expect, but he dreaded the thought of another murder. Another one he'd be responsible for. He quickly found out why he was uneasy. Tokugawans were known to be excellent with swords and bows. If he had to fight Japan, he'd end up dead with this kingdom in the hands of an infant.
Узбек, если я умру, за это будет отвечать Беларусь. Она возглавит королевство.
That roughly translates to, Uzbek, if I die, Belarus is in charge. She'll lead the kingdom. Pirog, Litvia, Mersok, Servich, Hadkila, Chi? That roughly translates to, Lithuania is the heir. He is Servich. What about him?
Он младенец. Если я умру, Московия получит первую женщину во главе.
That roughly translates to, he is an infant. If I die, Muscovy is going to have its first woman in charge. Russia and Uzbekistan arrived at the doors to the throne room next. She opened the doors and Russia stepped inside, immediately drawing his saber. Tokugawa really wants me dead, America joked out, his voice cracking from fear. In front of Russia, a woman held a sword to America's throat, holding him in place by his hair. Tears pricked at America's eyes, his eyes making contact with Russia's. Behind Russia, the door swung open and was immediately followed by a gasp from what he could only assume to be his two eldest sisters. Отпусти его. Russia's voice was cold and sharp, but the woman did nothing. That roughly translates to, let him go. She had long black hair and wore a white and pink ankle-length robe with large sleeves and a red sash holding it together at her waist. Her face was clear white with a red dot in the middle, and red makeup. In her hand, she held a katana.
本当に彼が欲しいなら迎えに来てください.
That roughly translates to, if you really want him, come get him. Russia complied, slowly approaching the two. He held his saber tight, his eyes focused on the woman for any sudden movements. The last thing he wanted was America getting hurt. America did sniffle a bit, a sign he was crying, but Russia paid no attention to it. Step by step, he approached, each step increasing the amount of caution he had. Одна его мне. That roughly translates to, give him to me. Japan smiled devilishly, swinging her katana towards Russia. Russia brought his saber up and blocked the blade, grabbing America and quickly yanking him to safety. Japan then threw a small dagger at Russia, it piercing his side. He groaned in pain, but attacked back. The sound of blades hitting each other filled the air, but slowly Russia was growing weak. Japan knew this, wearing the taller man down significantly. She would attack near his legs 1 second, then immediately go after his neck. She was getting more frustrated, however, that Russia kept blocking each attack, Russia not wanting his life to end yet. With a quick counterattack, Russia pierced through Japan's kimono, pulling his saber back to open the wound. She swayed for a few minutes before falling to the floor with a few colorful words in her native language. Russia stood over her, his vision growing dark quickly. He stumbled back and fell to the floor, his eyes just barely able to see the ceiling. Russia, no! Russia, не спит. Russia! Russia, focus on us. Those were the last things Russia heard before his eyes closed and death consumed him. The last thing he remembers, however, is the feeling of him holding America's hand, with America resting his forehead on Russia's. He wished he could kiss him one last time, tell him he'd be okay. But to die for America was the greatest honor he'd ever experienced. Russia, Любовь. That roughly translates to Russia, love. And that's the end of the story. Or the end that I'm going to give you. Because I want y'all to be able to, well, choose what you want for the ending to be. If you want to go with the actual ending, which is major character death that was not warned about, then you do you. Or if you just want to imagine, like I would like you to be able to do, then use this as the way to do so. But that being said, I'd like to invite you to join the Discord, which is linked down in the description below. And I think what's up next is 4 one-shots from Suspicious Glitch, and then after that, I think I'm doing Desert Road, and then I have no idea. But I hope you have a nice rest of your day, night, or whatever it is for you. Just enjoy your time. And I will see you tomorrow.